Hey, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. Good afternoon, maybe, wherever you happen to be. We're glad to be here with you. And as you can tell, I'm so glad to have George here with me in person. It's going to be a great day, George.
It is always a great day. It's an even better day when I get to come here in sweet home Alabama. So come back and also be with you.
Awesome. Good stuff. So glad you're all here with us. Looking forward to an amazing live stream today, really getting into talent acquisition, what candidates are saying, what employers and leaders like you are saying in our research. So it's going to be a lot of fun, some good stuff in store for you. Let's dive into some of the quick takeaways or housekeeping or whatever we want to call that stuff. I see some of you already chiming in the chat, being active, being good participants. We're going to reward you for that as always. So more to come. So we're excited to be here again for this live stream, diving into some of this good data with some great partners helping to support the event. You'll hear from some of them today, and we'll be talking about each of them in turn. Really quickly, some things that you need to know. So if this is your first time here, welcome. We're so glad to have you. It's a little different live stream, a little different than your typical webinar. Expect a different experience. So number one, stay engaged. Ask questions, chime in with your ideas, share what's worked for you or what's challenged you, be active in the chat, and we'll bribe them, right, George? Yeah, we'll give you some good giveaways. So we have this great book here, brand new, High Performance Recruiting. I got the review copy about 2 or 3 weeks ago, had a chance to read it. Really insightful by our good friend Trent Cotton. He's been on HR Summer School, some of our other events in the past, an amazing recruiting leader. Really insightful book on what it takes to elevate recruiting performance to a higher level, whether you're full-time in that, whether you're leading a team, whether you're an HR leader that wears a recruiting hat in addition to everything else. Some good stuff there. We'll be giving away all those things toward the very end today. So again, stay chimed in. We'll be sending details on HRCI and SHRM credits after the event is over with. And then if you are on LinkedIn and something gets hung up, it starts doing the spinny thing, we break LinkedIn on a pretty regular basis over here. I'll blame it on George. And he's too much awesome for LinkedIn to handle. And if that happens, we'll post into the chat in just a few minutes the links to Facebook and YouTube. Those are also in the invites you receive via email if you have to go back to that, just in case something gets hung up there. You can still comment on those platforms, by the way, and we can still see those, bring those to the stream, make you part of this as always. So we're glad for that. Here's what you can expect. We're doing our quick announcements right now. We'll dive into a conversation with Maria Monaco, some executive insights from her on leading a high-performing TA team. Really insightful. Love that conversation. You can just feel her genuine heart for doing good, doing well, and her appreciation for the team around her that makes that successful. We'll dive into a unified approach to candidate experience and onboarding employee experience, connecting those dots together with Sarah from HiBob. Some good stuff coming along. We're going to dive into all that today, and really thrilled. George, I know that I'm maybe a little more of a TA nerd than you are. I'll probably go ahead and take that one. But is there something specific that you're excited about today, hoping to get out to the audience, or something that you're like pumped to even learn yourself? I know that some of the TA stuff is kind of new for you.
It's new. I think been able to relate a little to this because of my retail days and having retail stores and going through the process of the recruiting stages. One of the things I'm really excited about, because I've had some sneak peek previews of the data, is really looking at and really seeing how it aligns with people in regards to some of the trends that's kind of changed. I don't want to say things have become more important, because I think all of them are important, but the priority, how things are now prioritized today based on what they were before. And so that interest really engages my spirit, because I think there's some alignment there also with the way the workplace trends are going as well, the way recruiting in general has been handled, the communication we both hear from our good friends in our network online. So I'm excited about those things. And then always my most favorite thing is the chat. The chat always grabs my attention. We already have some people shouting out some of our HR Summer School alumni that are in the house. So, applaud y'all for joining us as well and supporting as always.
All right, good stuff. Well, we're going to go ahead and get right into this. As you all know, we try to keep to our agenda the best we can. It is a live stream, so we may be not exactly on it, but we're going to try our best to keep to that. So we're going to dive in this first conversation with Maria Monaco. Really hear some insights, again, as I said, on leading a high-performing TA team, and I hope you enjoy this conversation. We're so excited to have you here with us for this amazing event today. We're excited to have some excellent content and conversations, ideas shared here, some research later on. We're going to kick off with a conversation. I'm so excited. Maria Monaco is here with me. I had a chance to meet her last year in person up in Montreal, was there for an event, and got a chance to meet her in person. And she was and is incredible, and was so excited to have her agree to come alongside and join today. So Maria, welcome. Glad to have you.
Thank you, Ben. I'm real glad to be here today.
Well, I'm thrilled to hear from you. I'm excited to hear your energy, your passion for all this come out in the conversation. But before we get to some of the good stuff, would you take a minute and tell the audience more about who you are and what you do, please?
Sure, with pleasure. So, my name is Maria Monaco. I head the talent acquisition division and staffing for what we call the CIUS Centre-Ouest de Montréal. It's based in Montreal, Quebec. I've got over 30 years of experience in the healthcare, in the Quebec healthcare. And Ben, it's been such a privilege with these 30 years to see the evolution of HR go from administrative to transform into strategic partner with a seat at the table.
Yeah.
So pretty much I've always been in HR. So that's my background.
You've always been. So you started out from the very beginning.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
That's not a
started
common story.
as a summer job.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, in HR. And then the recruiter at the time said, "Look, we've got an open position. Do you want to stay with us?" And I said, "Sure, I'll try it for a couple of years." And here I am 30 years later.
Oh, that's so fun. So many people are like, "Oh, I kind of fell into it." That's kind of an early fell into it story.
Yeah, it's an early, but I fell in love, and I fell in love with recruitment, and it's the right place for me.
That's so much fun. Well, excellent. I'm so excited again to have you here with us, and looking forward to dive into some things, what you're focusing on, what the team's thinking about, all that good stuff for the coming year ahead, to hopefully give the audience who's listening in here some ideas, some perspective from someone who's got some great experience and some leadership and all those good things to call on. So just to kick us off, what are some of the things that you and the team are really prioritizing or thinking about this year?
So we're thinking of a lot of great stuff, and it's really out of the box. And I'm sure everyone understands this, considering what's going on today with the talent scarcity. But I want to just set the stage a little bit and give a little preamble of what is the Quebec system and how it differs sometimes from other systems. So we're pretty much in I call a homogeneous setting, where basically all the organizations or all the healthcare organizations work with the same titles, platforms, salaries. Most of them are unionized environment, quite a unionized environment. So there's nothing really that makes you stand out one from the other. Yeah, and that's quite the challenge. So, and there's a real big gap between the public system and the private system in Quebec. So thinking out of the box and creativity is primordial for us. So how do we do it? What do we look at? So we're looking at candidate experience. Now, I know for a lot of people, this is not something new. You say, well, candidate experience is something we've been working on for a long time. But in a system, as I mentioned earlier, which is very homogenous, this is huge because we're one of the first to say we want the candidate to come have a great experience with us. We want them to choose us over anyone else. We want to engage with them quicker. We want to be able to use technology and leverage in this homogenous system. We pride ourselves on innovation and technology, and we really are a group of people that embrace this. And so, how do we get out there and say, we care, come and talk to us? We talk about inclusivity. We talk about coming to what's your purpose in our system. We want you to attach to the purpose of what we do. So, this is all what we're looking at today. One of the things we talk about a lot between myself and the team and my colleagues is the Gen Zs are entering the workforce. This is these are the next people coming into our workforce, and it's a challenge. The strategy has to change to speak to this new group of people. It's not that 1990s, early 2000s recruitment strategies. That doesn't work anymore. So we want to really be adaptable, reach out to them, speak to them in the language that they're comfortable. So what are we looking at? They want to know where to go, where to find the info, how to get there, and go for it. They want to be autonomous. They don't want to be told what to do or how to do it or where to do it, or worse than anything, give them paperwork to do. So this is what we're looking at. How do we reach out and how do we change our strategy to adapt to this new work group?
That's
And
encouraging
these
to
are
hear that.
some of the little bite size that we're doing out there to say, how do we stand out? How do we think different? How do we do things differently from the setting that's, well, very equal or same across the board?
I think a lot of companies could say that, though. People listening in here, even if they're not in that unique sort of context where you're in this public healthcare system and you don't control some of the variables out there, and you're like, well, they have to do the same thing we do. Some companies would say, yeah, well, that just means we don't have to worry about that because it's going to look the same anywhere anyway. And instead, you
Mhm.
and the team said, no, we want to be different in the best way. We want to look different, we want to sound different. We want to approach these different audiences in a unique sort of way to try to attract them, to try to appeal to them, and to try to stand out from this sea of sameness, as my friend George Rogers would call it. Like, we want to be different here and in the right kind of ways. That's exciting. Is there, you talked about like Gen Z as an example. You talked about how you're communicating to them, sort of what you're communicating to them. Are some of the key things? Are you also thinking about your sort of value proposition as an employer? It's not just a job and a pay rate, but it's a career here. What sort of things are you talking about in that context?
It's really great you say that, or you mentioned something that's really, really great for me. In your book, Talent Scarcity, I remember reading one line that you had written and said, you sell the bigger vision,
Mhm.
meaning and impact. I wrote it here to the candidates instead of a job and pay. And Ben, that's what I tell the team every day. It's not just about job and pay, because you can go out to any healthcare in our system and get the same job and get the same pay. So it's bigger than that. We want you to feel like you belong with us. We want you to feel that you belong to our purpose. You believe in our culture, you believe in our vision, that you're part of a team that really speaks to your needs. And that's what we're capitalizing on. And we're doing this really through our what's unique to us. And we brainstorm behind that, what makes us stand out, and we showcase this. And this is what we got. This is how we want to do it. Do you see yourself with us? So these are conversations that we have with the team often, saying we don't just want to go out there and say, here's your pay, here's your title, and this is where you fit, and here's the paperwork. Not
Take
at
care, leave
all.
it.
Not at all.
Yeah.
That's that 1990s HR that we spoke about before.
Yep.
Today it's, who are you? What do you want? How can I help customize your dream?
Mm. Oh, I like that. How can I help
Yeah,
customize
yeah,
that? Yeah,
yeah.
wonderful. Like that one. You mentioned you and the team sat down and thought about this, what your value proposition is, what do you have to offer, how are we different? If someone else
Mhm.
is listening in right now to this conversation and says, we've never actually done that, any tips or recommendations for them? Is it having a lot of voices in the room? Is it,
Um,
what's the best way to do that? Or what are some of the takeaways that they should expect to see?
it takes a village to recruit. It's
Mhm.
all hands on deck. Okay, this is not a one-man show anymore. It really takes a shared responsibility with the hiring managers, with directors, with team members, with employees. It's really a shared responsibility today. And what we started to do is build these relationships, build these partnerships.
Mhm.
So we have some really great partnerships going on right now. Some of them are new and still at the beginning stages, but the vision is really to have all of us work together. And I'll give you some examples. We've partnered with DIB, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging, wonderful team. And what we're looking to do with our colleagues there in HR is really embed DIB in recruitment.
Mhm.
So the team has a reflex of DIB. We really cast the net wider to aim and attract people who feel that they can belong with us. We want to embrace this and say, come to us because you'll belong with us. We've also partnered with academic affairs where we reach out to stagiaires, interns who come and do this little stint with us, bite-sized time with us, and say, hey, stay with us. And here's why. So we'll meet with them. We'll have events with them. We'll have virtual events with them. And we do this in collaboration with academic affairs and say, you've seen what we're all about. You've spent time with us. Now, how about doing your career with us? Let's talk about a career trajectory. We reach out to the first year, second year students, not only the graduates, and say, look, you're still in school, but we'll find a spot for you. How about you come and stay with us? Different title, different kind of work, but you get to see who we are and what we can do. And do you feel that you want to come back to us once you graduate? And this is what we're starting to build. comms, they're great partners of ours. We get the message out there, visibility out there. Storytelling is wonderful. How do we storytell what we do? Through videos, through Instagram reels, and help build our branding. So all these partnerships. And lastly, I'll talk a little bit about international recruitment, because we've got a really, I talk about casting the net wide. We've also, well, this is, I would say, a partnership with the government where we're reaching out to international countries that are francophone countries who are opening the doors to say, come and join us in Quebec, Montreal, Quebec, and come and work with us. So we're also stepping outside of the province and the country to say, come and join us here and see if you would like to try a stint in Montreal. So this is some of the ideas that we've started to build and partnerships that we have started to build to get that village to work with us.
That's a great set of examples. I'm so glad you brought those really practical things in. And I'm thinking, you're talking about visiting Montreal. I had a chance to do it about a year ago now. And it was funny for me because I'm from the southern US. And I was like, what's this white stuff on the ground out here? And yeah, no, it's just what we do. But that's not something that we're used to seeing down here. So that was kind of a fun break for me.
You're right. And Montreal's a gem, a real gem.
Yeah, excellent. Okay. So let's talk for a minute. You gave me some great examples there, some of the things that y'all are doing. Anything else that you want to throw out there that the team has done that you're just proud of? So when you want to shout out to things that you're like, we accomplished this thing and we are like so excited about it.
Yeah, for sure. So first and foremost, I can't do any of this without the team that I have. And I have to do, I really would like to do a little shout out to the team to say it's such a privilege for me to lead a team that is so dedicated and cares for the organization and its people. And I see this happening every day. It's not sometimes what you do, but the attitude behind what you do. That counts.
Yes.
And that's the core. And for me, that's where we start with connecting to the purpose. So, every day they're reaching out to me, Maria, I've got this great idea. I need you guys to do this. No problem. They're raising their hands, always ready to help others in HR. And this for me is just something that it's palpable and is what a team is. The team spirit is just incredible. And from that core that we start with, well, then there's all the adaptability. They're so adaptable. There's so much change, Ben, that's happened since, I'll say the word, since COVID, and they've been resilient, tenacious, adaptable, and still be able to come to me and say, we've got a great idea. Hey, I'm great on social media. Did you think of this, Maria? Hey, I'm great. I saw this as I was driving, and maybe we could consider it for us. And this is every day. And honestly, if it were not for them, we wouldn't be able to do most of what we're doing today. I wouldn't be able to do most of what I'm doing today. So I'm very proud of them. And through that, we're able to get out there and find nurses as much as we can, find the social workers, try to fill positions with reorganization. Look, this is a hard title to find. Did you consider maybe re-looking at your structure and consider this profile? Because this is a little easier to find. So these are some of the conversations that the teams have every day with their business partners, with their hiring managers, to help them fill these positions so that they're able to serve the patients and the residents and the users. At the end of the day, we like to call ourselves the people behind the people. So we really believe it.
That was one of the things that I picked up having a chance to meet the team there on site. We're doing some workshops and things. And I was just blown away. Like there was a real heart of service. You could feel it coming through the conversations and the comments and the ideas that were coming up. It was very clear immediately that that was where everybody comes from. As you said a minute ago, like, you didn't say exactly this way, but I've said it for a long time. I can teach anybody how to recruit, but I can't teach you to love people. I can't teach you to be excited about serving someone else. That's really hard to teach someone to do.
Exactly. And that's why I said it's all about the attitude. That comes first. Because the hard skill, we can all learn that. We can give you a book, we can teach that. But the behavior, adaptability, being able to embrace change. We're talking about, speaking of embracing change, I want to touch a little bit about technology. That's another thing that we're actually embarked on a journey right now, where we're looking at new platforms. Most of the Montreal, Quebec users, again, I'm going to go back to that homogenous society in the healthcare, use one platform. We're looking to really build a very unique system with a CRM, with an applicant tracking system that will enhance the candidate experience. That's really important to us. Enhance the hiring manager experience, and really have that shared responsibility that I spoke about before, where we work together in finding you the people. Recruiter efficiency, so that they spend more time talking to people and discussing a little bit, like we had talked before, about the bigger vision and the impact that they'll bring to the organization rather than the administrative part. Let the computer do that part. And I read your book, I read Talent Scarcity, and I see that you talk a lot about that. So we've embarked in that journey of how do we engage with the candidate before the competitor does. So maybe not before, better than the competitor does. Yeah.
Yeah, let them reach out all they want to. We're going to have a better hook. We're going to have a better
Absolutely.
connection. Like, let them.
Yeah, let them do it. It's fine. But how do we engage with them better, quicker, more efficient? Again, going back to that Gen Z,
Yes.
where everything is quick.
You know, Maria, one of the things I'm listening to you talk about some of these different things, like giving your team a shout out and talking about some of the things that the team has accomplished. And one of the things that occurs to me is like, it's not you and one other person. You've got this group around you that's doing good work, but it sounds like you're really in tune with someone who raises their hand and says, hey, I've got an idea or I've got a strength. And you're like, yes, let's do that. And let's align this with you. All right, let's align this with your strength. Or you've got this idea. Well, I'm not going to take credit for it. We're going to make sure you get the credit, and we're going to go out there and make this thing work because it's a great idea. And you're really trying to pay attention to the unique elements that each one of your people brings, whether it's some amazing idea or whether it's some sort of strength in terms of, hey, I know this candidate population really well. Can I go and pursue them? Or I know you mentioned social media. I know social media really well. Can I go out there and can I be our person that's sort of our personality, reaching out to candidates and being visible there? And you are really doing a job of trying to direct that work, direct the task to the people that it best fits, it sounds like to me.
Absolutely. So one thing that, I've got quite a big team. I'd say it's over 30 people on the team, and everyone has really their unique quality. Nothing is erased in the team. They know that they're able to bring any creative idea to the table. We discuss creative ideas all the time. Nothing is taboo. And I say, give it a shot. We'll try. If it's worth it, we will try it. They were so great that they even built what we call a little marketing committee. And they, on their own time, have joined this little marketing committee where they basically talk about different ideas to get the message out there. And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll have an idea and I'm like, oh, I'm not sure. And I'll throw it in the marketing committee and they come back to me and say, Maria, this is what we did with the idea. Someone else has an idea, you know what, bring it into the marketing committee. Let's see what they come back with. And they've come back with such incredible visions. And there's everyone in there. We've got novice in there, experienced, more senior team members in there. So we really try to embrace everybody's uniqueness, and everybody brings ideas to the table. And, when the attitude is good, care is there, and the good intent is there, it's really it's really something that's priceless. And talking about taking credit, I never do. If it belongs to you and it belongs to the team, the credit goes there 100%. So I really like to showcase what they do and raise that when I can.
There's a stat from our new recruiting study that really fits this well, because we asked organizations, do you have this brand that kind of stands out from everybody else? And the companies that said no, we said, okay, well, what are you doing to try to compete with those other companies? Some of them have this name that everyone knows and they're drawn to it. But for everybody else out there that doesn't have that brand behind them or that sort of value proposition to reach out there with, it's what are you doing? And the number one thing is exactly what you're talking about here. We're thinking about outreach activities, relationship building. How do we drive awareness? And they're thinking about that really strategically on an ongoing basis, not once a year. Like what's happening in January, we'll come back next year and tell you what worked. But on a regular basis, let's be considering and thinking about this and exploring new ideas. So that was one of the things that I thought was really fun to hear that from you, because that's what most employers are trying to do as a way to compete with those other companies and to try to stand out, whether they're well-known brands, whether they're in a space like you are where things are you can go to 5 different organizations and the job title, the pay is going to be all exactly the same. What else can we do that's going to stand out and be unique?
And I want them to have fun at work. I want them to come to work. I want them to have a great day. I want them to be able to use their knowledge and use their experience and share it and feel that they also bring value to their day-to-day work. And this is very important for me. Like we've got others, I want to retain my staff too, just like we want to retain members of the organization. And they will often come to me, and even in a workflow or in a process, they'll say, why are we doing it this way? Don't you think it'd be easier and better to do it this way? So we'll focus a little more on having more time to speak with the people or the employees. And I was like, for sure, let's take a look at it. So it's actually a learning experience for me because they learned from me, but I learned so much from them every day.
Goodness, wonderful. Okay. So for people listening in here, again, for the audience out there, I hope you're enjoying this, getting some good ideas and takeaways. If they're listening in here and they are like, okay, Maria, what advice do you have for us? Anything we should be doing, anything that we can do to either level up our recruiting or support and serve our own team or to care more deeply about candidates? You've mentioned some good things today that you if you want to, you can double down on, or if there's something else you haven't shared yet, it's like, here's 1 or 2 good takeaways for you to think about your recruiting activities in the coming year.
I think for me, the important thing is take care of your team, give them a voice, let them be heard. They've got great ideas. Take the time to listen to them. And they're the ones that are going to bring you what you need. At the end of the day, they're the ones that will bring you the results. So, the more they feel that they belong, the more they feel valued. And again, have fun. There's times to laugh and kid around, and then there's times to buckle down and get things done and have fun at what you do. And you know what? It's contagious. They'll love it, they'll feel it. And when they speak to the candidates will hear it. It's in the voice. You can't fake being happy at work. And they're going to say, you know what? I want some of that too. And if this is the company and this is how the recruiters feel or the staffing team feels, I want to be part of this.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a great call out. I would agree there. Right. For
Yeah.
a long time, one of the big sayings is, I'm going to mess this up probably, employees will never treat customers better than their leadership treats them, essentially. Right. And you're talking about a version of that. If we help our teams to love their work, we give them chances to do things, we don't burden them with all these administrative things to the degree we can, right? Let them do the work that really brings them joy and things you talked about here.
And feel psychologically safe to say things and not.
Yes.
And that's going to shine when you speak to candidates. Candidates will feel that.
Yes.
I love what I do. I love waking up every morning. I love being part of the recruitment. I love being able to be helping the organization that helps the people in their most vulnerable state. We work in health, and you can't fake that. It's authentic transparency with the team. That's something else. And I've learned that too over the years, and try to be as authentic and transparent as possible. They appreciate that. And they'll connect to that. Once they connect, everybody out there will feel it.
All right, Maria, if someone wants to connect with you, wants to follow you, wants some more of that passion that you're just throwing out there for all of us here, are you okay if they follow you on LinkedIn?
Absolutely. Would love it.
Okay, perfect. For all of you out there, reach out, connect with Maria, let her know you heard her on the session today, and let her know how much you appreciate her for being a good leader for her team, but also giving you some encouragement for how you can lead and support and serve your own candidates and your own internal team as well, your stakeholders for sure. Maria, thank you so much for joining me. This has been a ton of fun. I've really appreciated the time with you.
Ben, loved it. Thank you so much. And I got to say one last thing. Your book helped me a lot. I read Talent Scarcity. I memorized some part of it. And it's really given me a lot of insight on things and tips to help me build a team.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Always a privilege to speak to you.
Absolutely. To everybody else out there, stay tuned for more good stuff coming right up. All right. Good stuff coming right up. And here it is. George's good stuff. I think that qualifies. Goodness. I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Maria Monaco. Maria, you're a treasure, my friend. I appreciate you for joining us, for sharing some insights. And you could hear her passion, not just for the work that she does, but for her team around her. And I love that she's quick to give a shout out there. That was great. anything for you that kind of stood out or was interesting in what she was sharing? I thought the culture thing, like how do we
Yeah.
stand out from everybody else when our job titles or our pay rates might be the same? I thought that was kind of interesting.
I think the last bit of what she said really stuck with me as well. With the connection, when you're connected to people, uh, they'll feel it. And I think about that a lot. We think about the power of connection. When I think about the power of connection, I think about technology. We're in a technology world, but everything needs to be powered, right? And so when
Mhm.
there's connection there's a feeling, and that feeling becomes a belief. That belief becomes a behavior. And
Mm.
that goes back then to what I believe culture is. It's feeling, it's belief, belief becomes behavior. And so when it comes to recruiting, several questions. How do we, once we recruit and we get them into the building, how do we keep them? And I think it's the power of that connection. It's the power of, even as a recruiter, checking in with them. They have that foundational seed of, hey, you are the first one I talk to, that impact and that value. I think that relationship builds. When they can build a relationship and then trust you as an individual, and
Mhm.
you introduce them to more people, there's that connection there, right? Where I feel like Ben's never going to introduce me to somebody who's going to lead me astray. And so having that relationship of trust and connecting, as she said, was so powerful and it's so true.
You're reading ahead in my slides a little bit because there's one of the stats we're going to share with you all in a little bit. I've heard this over the last couple of years, and it was one of those things that was kind of back on mind because when I was recruiting, I often was that point of contact for someone for even weeks or even months into their job. They still would come back to me with questions or things that were kind of weird for them or awkward to ask their boss. And so we asked candidates, does that person, whether they're an HR person or recruiting person, is that person that helped bring you in, is that a point of contact that you stay connected to? And the majority of candidates said yes. And 6 out of 10 candidates said that person makes me feel more connected to the company overall. So again, we'll get to some of that. I'm reading ahead and some of the data we're going to share later, but that does matter. And so hearing that from Maria about that transparency and that connection, that authenticity, it weaves through all of these things.
Yep.
And again, we're about to hear from Sarah over at Hi Bob. The Hi Bob team is one of the sponsors, supporters of the show today, of the event today. And Sarah talks about that connection from candidate experience on into employee experience. It's not two separate things. Like, all right, great, we've recruited you, George. Now go, stand in the muck, and if you need anything, just don't ask because we're not giving it to you. No, like, how do we continue this high touch, this personalized, this caring for you all the way through into that employee experience? So we're going to get with Sarah Reynolds at Hi Bob. And I was laughing, Sarah, a moment ago. I see you in the chat. You're already active there. I was laughing because when Maria said, oh yeah, we put together this little marketing committee to think about that, Sarah's like, yes, as someone with a background in marketing, that is their big focus. So that was kind of fun for me to see, like the fist pump virtually from that. So here we go. Let's hear from Sarah Reynolds at Hi Bob on how to create this more unified and connected experience across candidate and employee experience. Really excited to have you here with us for this awesome live stream today. We've had some good conversations so far, and I'm really excited to have Sarah back with us. If you have followed some of the streams and stuff we've done, Sarah's been with us in the past, really excited, passionate about all things like equity and DEI. And today we're going to talk about some of the challenges that employers are having in the hiring process. Is just a big focus of our event. So Sarah, welcome. I'm glad to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to be back and so glad to see all of the great engagement today. This has been fantastic.
Awesome. Well, we are thrilled that Hi Bob's partnering with us on this because y'all have some big stuff coming up and things that y'all are working on. And I'm excited to talk to you about some of the unique sort of flavor of what Hi Bob does and how y'all see the world as a sort of this stream of connection from the candidate experience on into the employee experience and how we support people through that whole journey. So before we get into some of that fun stuff, for the audience that doesn't know Sarah, would you take a minute and let us know more about who you are and what you do, please?
Sure. My name is Sarah Reynolds. My pronouns are they and them. I'm Chief Marketing Officer at Hi Bob. Hi Bob is a modern HCM platform for the types of businesses who really care about their people, who are global in nature, and who are probably in that sort of like sweet spot between 100 and 10,000 employees. We really believe that we serve sort of like a nice underserved market in this space. We want to make technology that's really easy to use, fun to use, intuitive, that's flexible, that grows along with your business and changes along with your business changes in the market. And ultimately, that delivers your ability to become that strategic, influential HR partner that your business really needs. So I'm really excited to be here. As Ben alluded to, we do have some exciting announcements in Hi Bob land that hopefully we'll get to talk about today. But this topic in particular is near and dear to my heart because I think that all of us have had great experiences in hiring processes and and onboarding with companies, and maybe not so great experiences that could have been improved by a strategic HR leader.
Absolutely. Well, that's a great tie into this, because what I want to start with is we're talking about hiring today, a lot about that, but I want to start at the very end of the process, not the beginning. So the last thing that happens typically that we think about is this onboarding. And in some companies, it's just like, okay, we got their documents, we've got their stuff. Okay, they're signed off and you're free to be an employee now. But there's different ways of looking at that. And I would argue there's a lot more to it. Would you talk about that a little bit, and how HiBob sees that transition from you were a candidate, now you're an employee here? Is it just a handoff, or should there be more?
Yeah, I think there should definitely be more. Obviously, you want to run a great hiring process, right? You want to deliver a great candidate experience. You want it to be fast and confident decision making, right? Like lacking any bias. You want it to be your perfect candidate experience. Let's say that you deliver that, right? Because you're really good at what you do. Now you move into pre-boarding and then onboarding. Pre-boarding, right, is oftentimes when you collect all that necessary information that you need from candidates to be able to get them set up in something like HiBob on day one. You want to make sure that you are collecting that information and giving candidates access to the system to be able to populate all the necessary information that you might need from them. You also, though, want to take the opportunity to maybe ask them some things about themselves and collect some data that's maybe non-traditional in that pre-boarding process. So at HiBob, we ask folks, what do you love to do? We actually create employee clubs based on what folks volunteer and tell us about themselves in that pre-boarding process, or even after they join. We have folks who are interested in cooking, who love fantasy novels, who love hiking. We're a really outdoorsy team. I'm an indoor cat, but much of my team is outdoorsy. And we collect some of that information. We ask employees to volunteer that information so that we can get to know them a little better. We ask them for some of the other basics that you might want to know. Of course, a beautiful photo of yourself, but maybe how about how you pronounce your name, or what pronouns you use, how you identify, how you'd like to be represented in internal documents, how you'd like to be represented out to the market if you are in a client-facing role. We ask lots of different questions, all of which, of course, are voluntary, but it helps us to get to know the employee right from day one. That's the pre-boarding process. Then you move into onboarding, right? Because you don't want onboarding to just be like, fill out some paperwork and you're let loose. You want it to really be, you want it to be representative of your company culture. So if I could leave you with anything about onboarding, think about, of course, you need them probably to do some compliance training. Of course, you need them probably to meet a few key folks in your organization, but you also want to deliver an onboarding experience that's really true to your culture and that introduces them to your values and that talks to them not just about what you do at your company, but also how you do it, why you do it the way that you do, and what you expect of them. Because I think if you can give folks a leg up on how to work effectively in your company, you'll give them a leg up on really contributing to your culture from day one, really being that culture ad that hopefully you were hiring for. So of course, you're probably going to have some required information. You want to have a great task-based workflow that's all automated, that's all beautiful, right? But I think that the more information you can give them about the how and the why of your company is really going to set them off on the right foot.
It seems to me that a lot of companies think about onboarding as this very tactical, transactional sort of thing. And what I just heard you lay out there is it's an emotional and social thing too. And we often forget those things, it feels like, because we're focused on, I'm being audited on XYZ. Like I get these forms done or these policies signed off, and you're not arguing that's not important. But if that's all we do, we're stopping here when we could be up here in terms of building that runway, that on ramp for someone to get really connected in, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're hopefully starting a great long-term relationship with this person. You're entering into a contractual agreement, right? You're entering into kind of a marriage, and you hope that's going to last a long time. Don't you want to start that on the right foot? Don't you want to start that with the right vibe, as the kids say? Like, don't you want to start that leaving a really good impression on them and them making a really good impression as they come into your organization, or knowing what good looks like even as they come into your organization? I think onboarding should be a strategic process. Of course, you can automate it. Of course, you can have all the required tasks that you need sent out to employees so that they're completing the things we traditionally think of as pre-boarding or onboarding tasks. But if you stop there, you're missing the opportunity to really set that relationship off on the right foot.
Yes. Okay. I just talked to this leader, Junko Fukuma, and she was telling me about that their company uses these things called me manuals when you're starting out. Like, here's the user guide for how to interact with Sarah or how to interact with Ben. And like, hey, on Mondays, don't come at me before 9 o'clock because I haven't had my coffee yet. Like, that's a silly example, but hey, in meetings, I like to sit back and reflect for a minute before I respond. So if you ask me right off the bat, I'm not going to have an answer for you, and I may need just a little bit to process. And so help people figure that out. That's what I'm hearing. You're talking about some of these things, like that's what they're really essentially trying to do with that. And their goal with that, and it sounds like your goal too, is like, let's make you feel like you belong. You really are connected here. You are in the right place for you. You culture add. That's what you mentioned earlier. So I love that. Anything else that you would throw out there as like a differentiator? Y'all work with some amazing clients out there. I've heard some of the stories and actually had a chance to talk to some of them. Anything that any clients are doing on the onboarding piece, you're like, that's really cool, or this is a great example of what other companies can do to weave into their process?
Yeah, I think automating some of that pre-boarding does fulfill that promise we've been talking about in the industry for a long time, whether you think about it as automation or AI or whatever, that we will be able to free up our HR resources, move them away from manual tasks, and start to have them focus on the strategic process of HR. So I work with a client here in the UK who is a really great example of this. They were doing like 30 new hires a month, and they had a team member whose basically whole job was to do the pre-boarding, to do the document collection, to do all of the checkbox activity to get somebody set up in Bob. And they found that when they embraced automation and they embraced something that sort of delivered that workflow directly to the candidate's inbox and said, hey, welcome to our company, click here to get started. And it really walked them through step by step. Yeah, of course, what are the required pieces of documentation? And also, what are the things that we want to know about you? It started the candidate relationship off on the right foot, or the new employee, I should say, relationship off on the right foot. It also freed up their team members' time. They're now thinking about not just onboarding from the first time you join the company, but they work with a lot of software developers, and they're thinking about project-based onboarding. So you have a new project, you're joining a new team in the organization, or you're going to work on something new. You probably need to familiarize yourself with what work has been done to date. Maybe you need to learn a new skill, or in their case, a new programming language. Maybe you need to recertify or certify for the first time on something that you haven't done before. All of those are opportunities for you to take onboarding and apply that same sort of ethos that you want to get somebody started on the right foot to something as specific and repeatable in your organization as new projects. So when I think about cool examples of what folks are doing with onboarding, of course, there's a lot of like, what kind of data are we getting out of that? Like, what initial signals does it send about how engaged somebody is? But I think about like, hey, the world of work is changing. If we think about a skills-based organization and project-based work, well, this company is a really great example of how you sort of take what you learned in onboarding, and now you can start to apply that in many different processes across your company.
Excellent. Excellent. So for all of you out there listening to this, and like, yeah, like we're on board with that. We believe this, not on board as a joke, but on board, like we believe this. One of the things that we saw in the actual research is number one, the number one priority when we asked TA leaders, like all of you out there listening in right now, the number one thing that they said was a priority for their recruiting and talent teams this year was onboarding for the first time ever. It's always been something else like sourcing or recruitment marketing, or onboarding popped out at number one. The other thing that's important is all the things that you're talking about here, Sarah, what this process could look like and should look like for doing the right things by our new employees. That's highly tailored, personalized, engaging, all those things, not just compliant, but all of those. Only 15% of companies said that they have a process that meets those sorts of guidelines. 85% of them have something that's like, yeah, we're compliant, we're checking the box, we're good, but we're not doing all those other things. So there's a lot of opportunity for us to improve that. And Sarah shared some great examples already on how to make that possible, how to practically do that. So let's move on from there and talk a little bit about data. I know this is like your love language, I think, Sarah. So one of the things in the research that we saw is that a lot of companies said we don't have a really good, clear picture of what's happening in our sort of hiring activities across the board. And we could argue that that's because there's not enough maturity there in measurement. Everybody's too busy. There's 15 different tools we're using, any sort of number of reasons for that. I'd love to hear your take on that. What do you think is causing that? What do you think the cost of that is, of not having really clear data to make decisions on?
think that there's like a disconnection or a siloing that happens. Like everybody knows that you collect a lot of data in the recruiting process, right? And oftentimes that's stored in an applicant tracking system that is disconnected from the systems that you use once the person moves from candidate status to employee status. So it's disconnected maybe from your HCM solution. It's disconnected from performance management. It's disconnected from compensation management. It's disconnected from everything that they come to sort of know as like your HR single source of truth once they become an employee. But the reality is that there's so much value to be had in connecting those things. It's one of the reasons that HiBob is really excited to announce that we're adding a hiring solution to our sort of HCM portfolio, because we sat back and we said, what if you could tell your recruiting team which channels produced high performers a year later, or which channels produced future leaders in your organization? They might be the more expensive channels. They might be the harder ones to crack into. But if you had that information, wouldn't you go look for candidates in the places that you knew were going to produce really successful employees? If you keep that data totally siloed, you're lacking that understanding, or you're missing the opportunity to have sort of a 360-degree feedback loop into the recruiting process to be able to say, this is what good looks like. This was a great hire. And we see that in the data, right? People really struggle to articulate what is quality of hire, right? What is the metric that you use when you talk about quality of hire? And you see recruiting teams, instead, they focus on speed, time to hire. They focus on some of the other things like the funnel. I'm a marketer. I understand how we got there, right? But I think that there's so much opportunity for us to demonstrate that strategic, really influential value when we connect the data back. There's also like a great partnership to be had sort of on the other end, where you're talking about, well, how do I build credibility with my finance team? How do I speak the language of the business? I think if anything, probably the language of the business is like my love language these days. But if I am working with finance and they're saying, we need to hire 50 quota carrying sales reps this year in order to hit plan, they want to know, are you tracking to hire 50 quota carrying sales reps, and are they going to be great, right? When they come on board, right? Are they showing the right signals in onboarding? Are they reaching their first 30-day checkpoint and having, a great conversation with their manager? Are they ramping along the plan that you've set out for them, right? Because if you don't have that sort of connection to workforce planning on the other side, you're missing the opportunity to be able to forecast confidently to your friends in finance and your friends in the C-suite, we're on track to hit plan. We're delivering strategic value to this organization. So I really think about the opportunity of connecting that data really across your business. And it's one of the reasons why we're really excited to be able to offer something new in the market that says, hey, we want you to do strategic hiring. We want you to plug into workforce planning. And then we want you to look at the back end and the relationship management, the performance management, and the assessment of folks once they're in the organization, and compare that all the way through.
Goodness, I'm so excited. So number one, congratulations to the team. Like, this has been a lot of work behind the scenes, making this all come to life. And I'm excited for the companies you're working with to be able to tap into that. The thing that stands out to me, you talked about quality of hire a minute ago. We actually survey HR and talent leaders about what that looks like. It's, are they staying? Are they performing? And as you said, none of the recruiting tools out there actually look at whether they stay or they perform. And so if we want to understand those pieces, we've got to have a continuous look at what that person was from a candidate to an employee, and on beyond that, we have to see those things as a full continuum instead of just separate pieces, because it's too hard to connect that all together. So I get so excited to talk about the quality of hire, because when we ask someone, you talked about speaking the language of the business and really proving value back. We asked talent leaders, what is the number one metric for showing the business that you have value, that you're providing real value back to the organization? And it wasn't how fast we filled those jobs or how much it cost for each individual one. It was, are we hiring quality people? That was the number one thing that really proves that back. So I'm glad you tapped on that one, because that's important for everyone here. We would agree, I think that matters a lot to us. We would be willing to wait a little longer to get the right person if we knew they were coming down the line. And again, having all these things together, understanding the forecasting and the quotas for the sales reps, that was a great example of how to connect those things. Any other advice you would give our friends here around being better at using the data they have, who they should be sharing it with, like those kinds of things? Because if we're collecting this stuff and we're sitting on it, or we're not socializing it, or we're not using this to make decisions, then it's not having its full value and impact. Any other thoughts on that piece of it around using the data we're collecting?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many opportunities to use data to tell stories. Data is only as powerful as like a specific stat, but when you turn that stat into a story about your business and especially about the impact on your business performance or your business result, suddenly you got a lot more whoop, like ears like I'm paying attention, right? I think to your point about demonstrating value, making sure that you're communicating back to the business in the language of the business to talk about quality of hire, to talk about the impact of the folks that you're hiring into the organization, to talk about your alignment to plan, recruiting plan in this case, very particularly. It starts the conversation, it starts the story of the value you add in a really different place than if you are focused more on some of those like top of funnel or more recruiting sort of centric types of metrics. I think that's a great place to start. Understanding time to hire, time to fill is a critical part of being able to forecast to the business. How are we on track? How much time would we need to be able to bring all those people into the organization? But if you don't take it one step further, I do think that you miss the opportunity to come back and, as you say, demonstrate that strategic leadership in your function.
So making it relevant, really connecting it back and making it relevant to the people you're talking to. I like that. There's a lot of energy around this. If someone wants to know more about what HiBob's been doing here, some of the new announcements and things, what's the best place to go to learn more about that?
If you want to say hi to HiBob, you can visit us at hibob.com. It's really easy. If you want to say hi to me, of course, you can find me on all the usual channels, but LinkedIn is a good place to start. I'm /Sarah Liz Reynolds. I love talking about these topics, and I love having the ability to unpack with folks those really cool use cases of what people do with the data. So if you also have ideas about how you're embracing that strategic hiring in your organization or how you're thinking about demonstrating the value of your hires back to the business or the value of your team back to the business, I'd love to hear about it too. I know I'll try and keep up with the little chats and stuff like that. So fun. But yeah, I think it's a great opportunity for you to think a little differently about that hiring motion in your organization. And if we can be a great partner for you, or at least get your sort of your brain running on what are some of the opportunities, if you do think a little bit differently, then that's all we want.
Okay, perfect. Wonderful. Sarah, thank you for joining us. I'm going to make sure and get your LinkedIn handle here into the comments so everybody can connect with you. Make sure I'll link out to HiBob as well if someone wants to say hi to HiBob. And thank you so much for joining us, for sharing your insights and expertise. To everybody else out there, let's give the virtual round of applause back to Sarah for spending some time with us and really sharing some passion for how we can do onboarding using our data, really creating better experiences for our candidates into the employee experience as well. Thank you, Sarah. All right. Goodness. So Sarah, enjoyed that so much. Got some great takeaways, ideas, suggestions from you, and really appreciate you talking about hiring as this continuous connection. Someone said a moment ago in the chat, like continuous communication, connection, building that from the very first touch point, right? We can't have a great, deep relationship the first time that George and I chat on the internet. But after we've been together for a while, I've had some chances to meet and talk and start to share interests and everything else. And as a part of that conversation, that becomes a chance to really do that and do that in a powerful sort of way, which was a ton of fun. So awesome. Good stuff. Okay. Anything from you? What was your thought? Like HiBob's our friends over in like the culture world. So I know
one of the things I think that the HiBob does really well, and Sarah mentioned in one of the comments, when it comes to the onboarding, and again, we're talking about how do we, the connectability, is that a word? It is now.
It is now.
There's
George's connectability.
But the connectability that HiBob does, one of the features is the club, feature where if you know something about George, it's not just George that knows that, and I have to share it down to connect with Ben or connect with Sarah, who's in a different department. No, their software really then branches out and say, hey, this is our club. We have general interest in similar things. And so when it goes to that employee experience, again, from onboarding through the whole process, I think the information that they provide and with HiBob, I'm not just saying it because Sarah was speaking, but I think it's unique when you're able to essentially map those things together, those interests together. We talk about relationships and connecting and the importance of those things. That's sustainability when we talk then about the retention. How do we keep people? People want to be connected. When they're connected, that's a simple thing that can be used. The me manuals, I had to ask you again. I was like, hey, repeat that. Thankfully, behind the screens to be able to get that piece was very unique as well.
Yeah.
To have something that's, hey, this is how George responds again. for meetings. He likes preparation. He likes to think before he just talked out a question. So, or some people just like to be warned, hey, we have a meeting. Some people get stressed when they hear, hey, we got a meeting. They want to know if it's good, bad, or ugly.
Yes.
So having that preparation, hey, here's a meeting. George likes to know there's a meeting, follow up, and give him brief details on what he should expect from a meeting. That way he can gather some thoughts, premeditated, attentions towards that versus it's been thrown into whatever fire it may be.
Yeah.
Or it could be a great thing. And still, we want to make sure our nerves are calm enough to receive, even good news sometimes.
Yes, absolutely. Like that was one of the things I saw several comments on the Me manuals. I posted in the chat the interview that I had with Junko because it was incredible. She shared all about how they do this at their organization. And you'd imagine it's great for the onboarding sort of process we talked about here. But she said some of their existing teams, when they were having trouble or having some friction, they went in and did like a reset with that, and it created deeper relationships. So it was already something there because we had a point of connection, but we made it not known there was another one over here just because we get heads down, focus on the details, focus on the work. I won't let George comment on how I do that sometimes. So it's part of it. Okay. So Sarah Reynolds, hi, Bob. Thank you so much. So our next conversation is going to be, I'll bring the agenda back up really quickly. So we're going to be talking with Sarah from Enterprise Mobility. And Sarah, one of her big passions is bringing early talent, early career talent, people who are still in school for internships, people who are brand new out of school, ready to start their professional jobs. She's working on those kind of things and helping build those connections. And you'll hear her passion on those pieces. I want to give a quick shout out to our friends over at Filtered. Rocky, you're in the chat here. I see you chiming in. Go ahead and say hello to everybody virtually there. But Rocky and the team at Filtered are supporting the event today. And I was talking to him about what we wanted to do with their session they had. And he said, let's let Sarah get up there. She's amazing. She's got a great story to tell. And so I wanted to give a shout out to them because Filtered is helping talk about some of the things we talked about a minute ago, quickly helping us screen candidates, helping companies get to the right people without having a bunch of things slowing the process down, everything else. They're doing a great job of that. So thanks to the team at Filtered again for supporting us, for connecting us with Sarah. And without any further ado, we'll get out of the way, let you hear from an incredible TA leader and person, Sarah. So glad that you're here with us for the live stream today, getting some good notes, some good ideas, some good conversations happening already. And I'm so excited to have Sarah here with me. We're going to talk about emerging talent. We're going to talk about how to connect with your people and create better candidate experiences, all that kind of good stuff. Sarah, glad to have you. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. So really quickly, before I dive into some of the good stuff and ask you more about yourself, thank you to the team at Filtered for connecting us together. They're doing good work. They're helping employers to find and select the best candidates in a quick way. And so we appreciate Rocky and their whole team for making this connection with Sarah. I love meeting amazing people, and we will let Sarah judge at the end if I'm an amazing person or not to be included in that. But so glad you're here with us. So for starters, before we get into some of the fun stuff we're going to talk about, Sarah, would you take a minute and tell the audience more about who you are and what you do, please?
Absolutely. So I lead the talent acquisition team for the information technology division at Enterprise Mobility. Absolutely love Enterprise Mobility as an organization. I started in our management training program, which is very common in our company. We have a promote from within culture, and a lot of people in our organization actually start through that management training program. Through opportunities, though, I was able to get my foot into talent acquisition many, many years ago now. And when I found my spot in TA, I felt like I found my home and where I could add the most value to the organization. So I've continued to grow within my TA career path and now leadership TA since then.
Oh, that's so much fun. I love that. I've heard lots of good things about the training program there at Enterprise, by the way. That's the thing that's just known in the industry broadly. That's something they do really well. So that's super cool to hear your perspective on it.
Great program.
So you had told me a couple of times, right? I'd asked you some topics and things that are important to you. And you mentioned immediately, like right off the bat, was emerging talent. And I'd love to hear, like, of all the things you could have said, TA is a wide, wide world. Why is that one of the things that you're passionate about?
Well, a few reasons. I mean, for starters, that's how I came into this company, and I was continued to give opportunity. My leaders invested in me, my training and my development, which created opportunity. So I'm really passionate about being able to do that for others as well. In addition to that, on the TA side of the house, there's so many benefits that come from being able to hire emerging talent, bringing that fresh perspective into your organization, the new ideas and contributions our emerging talent population can make to our organization has been incredible. In addition to that, you have the ability to grow them, develop them. They absorb into your culture. They're hungry to learn and continue on their career journeys. So we found it to be really rewarding to bring that talent in and then be able to continue to grow them into the areas where we need talent in IT. It serves as a pipeline, a talent pipeline for our organizational needs.
Is there something in that space? So that's why it's exciting to you. Is there something in that space that y'all are doing? Like, we're really proud of this, or we're doing this thing that I think other companies should absolutely be copying because it's created incredible results and relationships?
Yes. So we have an incredible internship program here within the Information Technology Division at Enterprise Mobility. It's a 10-week program and it is highly engaging. It's very robust in terms of the agenda, training, exposure to leadership, networking opportunities. So throughout the course of the 10 weeks, they are integrated into teams where they're getting exposure to meaningful project work. They're not just coming in and doing, but then one day a week, they're with our team. And we have a whole 10-week outline of planned activities that's intentionally meant to help with their understanding of our organization, helping with both technical and professional competency development, exposure to our leadership team. And when I say our leaders are excited to take part in this, they are just as invested in our emerging talent population as the rest of our employee population. They always jump at the opportunity to get to spend time with our interns. We also take them out. Our home base for Enterprise Mobility is in St. Louis. So we do a whole community outreach day. And then we go around and visit different tech hubs and tech spots in the St. Louis community to give them exposure to things going on, not just within our company, but within St. Louis as well.
That's an incredible approach where it's not just the stereotypical, hey, have you gotten my coffee yet this morning? There's all these other things of adding value for them there throughout that entire process. I hear a lot of companies say, oh yeah, we expose them to leaders, but it's this very sort of tangential, like, oh, look, there's one over there. If you hurry, you can spot them, and then they're gone. What do the leaders do when they're engaging with them? Are they listening to these interns about what they're looking for in an employer? What's that conversation look like?
Yeah, so they engage in a few different ways. Some leaders come in and talk about their personal career journeys. So we'll typically have a whole panel of leaders that come in and talk about how they started, the experiences they had, what was helpful in their careers as they continue to progress. And then they also open it up for Q&A. What's important for the interns to ask them? What do they want to learn about? So we have panels with our leaders where it's just informational and it's informal, but it's an opportunity to get to know them and learn from them. They also attend our events. They love networking and spending time with them and just establishing more of those organic, real relationships with the interns, and encourage them and mean it when they say, if you have other questions or you want to learn more about what I've done, reach out, set up time with me. And the interns know they can do that.
For anybody listening in out there, by the way, one of the things that the data show is that when you're looking at sources of hire, interns that convert over into employees typically perform better. They stick around longer. I don't know if enterprises data show that or not, but just generally in the market, that's one of those things that you see overall. It's like a referral. They know enough about your company to say intentionally, yes, I want to work there. And so that's one of the values and benefits of this, not just in engaging with them as early talent and everything else, but saying once they are beyond that, they've grown out of that, if they want to continue with us, we're going to get extra benefits from them as an employee once they do potentially convert over. Yeah, excellent. If someone's listening here and they're like, oh, this is actually sounds really interesting, or our internship program is like down here and we feel like Sarah's and the enterprise team is up here. Any advice, any recommendations you'd give to our friends out here listening in on what they could do to maybe level up their own approach to connecting with interns, creating a more robust program, just building those relationships like you've talked about here?
Yeah, so first we start recruiting for our internship program in the fall. Typically by the holidays, our program for the next summer is full. And we have really strong university partnerships that we lean into. So we lean into our university partners to help with finding great talent to come to the program. But we have found that it's extremely competitive out there. And to find strong internship talent, you need to get in front of it early. So we're very intentional about that. And we understand it's a time commitment, but it's time very well spent and worth all of the investment. So I would make sure you're dedicating time from your team to allow for the one day a week we're on site with the interns and the planning components that go into that as well. And we've had this program in place for many years now, and it has a really good reputation. So in addition to our university partners, we've now established an incredible referral pipeline for our interns, where we get tons of referrals, both from former interns, which is fantastic, as well as employees within our organization that are sending referrals our way to pipeline for the program. One other suggestion I have as it relates to emerging talent is we talked about intern conversions, and that is a goal for our program. When we're bringing talent into the internship program, we want to convert that talent. We want to find the right opportunity for them to continue their career journey upon graduation when they're ready to join our organization in a full-time capacity. And one thing we've worked hard at developing is when they convert, they've just gone through this incredible, very engaging program. We don't want them to come here and then feel like, now what? What's next? So we've also worked to create a great onboarding and assimilation program that is specifically for the emerging talent population, where once they join, they get an additional 12 months of focused development, focused training to help them continue to assimilate into our organization, because we want to make sure once they're here, we're continuing to set them up for success so that they can continue to grow.
I'm going to continue on that thread there for a little bit, if you don't mind, because one of the things that we find a lot of companies do, number one, everybody that comes on is treated the same when they're onboarding. Like, no, don't do that. You're missing a chance here. And you talked about really setting a separate track for them to run on so they know we're investing specifically into you because we want you to be more valuable a year from now. Like, you're great already. We want you to be even better a year from now, and we're going to invest in you to make that possible. But we also, one of the sessions we kicked off the day with talked about onboarding as this sort of personalizing, not a compliance driven, but very personalized, very tailored, focused on development, connection, as you talked about here. And what I love the picture you're painting, because these individuals aren't just showing up like anyone else. They know more about the company already. They know about the inner workings already and some of the ways you serve customers. They've also started building relationships with good mentors and leaders in the business. So when they come on full time, it's like, hey, guess what? You remember Amy from that course? She's actually starting with us. Like, they get excited all over again. And that person, that individual that's taking that role as an early talent individual, they already have advocates for them placed in the organization because of those relationships they built. I would imagine. I'm making a little bit of assumptions there, but I think that's
absolutely. Yeah, the relationships they built with their leaders, that their other coworkers, peers, but also with each other in the program, because we're intentional about creating those connections for them, bringing them together every week. They start to build their own professional networks that they lean into, and they're excited to see each other, lean into each other. So we see that continue to carry on once they're here, and they continue with that networking from everyone they went through the program with.
Excellent. So you've talked a little about the internship program, how you're connecting with them, everything else. I want to take a broader look for just a minute, if you don't mind, and talk about just overall hiring and some of the things that are struggles for us, all of us out there that are TA leaders and HR leaders trying to figure those things out. It's a challenge. But one of the things I know that's important to you is speed, expediting the hiring process, trying to streamline that and make it more valuable. Talk about your perspective on that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So a few years ago, we were looking at market insights, and the ramp up time for interview process to hire to onboarding, it was taking a while, and the market was so competitive. And so we wanted to make sure, one, that we were efficient in our processes, but two, the candidate experience is so important in that. And you want to make sure they have a good experience from a timely standpoint as they're going through our process. So we looked at how we were previously interviewing, and we adapted our model to what we call an expedited hiring process. And we created an interview panel that had representation of leadership and technical SMEs across different areas of our organization. And we brought them together to conduct interviews versus completing individual interviews with individual teams. And we've gained so many benefits from that. One, in terms of our application to hire, but also we've found so much value because of this panel. We're able to consider candidates for different areas, but then they don't have to interview individually each time. And it expedites the time that they're interviewing to hire. So it's been really effective.
That is tremendous. So some of the data that we're actually sharing later today in the live stream, one of the things we'll talk about is when we surveyed the candidates out there, some global candidate population, We ask them what causes the hiring process to drag on. What do you think is the cause of that? Because they don't see what all we see, right? The number one answer is the company's hiring process. We think the process itself is probably poorly designed, or we've got that manager's like, I've got to have my 6th interview. Oh, come on, please. You're killing me here. I'm trying to help you as a recruiter, and you're making this so much harder on us. So candidates already know generally the hiring process is the thing to point at. But I think that is an incredible insight to have this sort of multi-purpose interview where we can evaluate you for more than one thing. We can have the different personas in the room that need to be looking at this versus saying, hey, come back next week and then come back the week after that. And then we'll tell you if we even want to talk to you beyond that, especially for the in-demand candidates who are highly qualified. They've got more offers than they need. They're not going to put up with that. They're going to be the ones.
Yeah. Good talent goes off the market really fast. So being able to address that and get in front of it, that's been really helpful for us. So for the hiring panel, we're very thoughtful to make sure we have representation that can speak to the strategic initiatives that are going on in our organization and give them kind of a wide lens to all of the things that we're doing across IT. Because when we are hiring someone, we want to hire them for the entity. We want them to come in and be excited about not just this one position on this one team, but think about what your career growth can look like from here. And once you come here, this is just the beginning. We're going to give you exposure to this project and this advancement opportunity as we focus on your development. So I think it also helps create the right mindset as they're coming into the organization for what we want their future career growth to look like.
Yeah. I don't want to call them a resource in a negative way, but like you're a shared asset to the organization, and you may be here for this year, but next year you're gonna be over there doing great things wherever you happen to be. And we want you to know that whichever manager picks you, they don't own you. You're here to support the areas that you're excited about and the areas where we need you as an organization. So I would imagine, as with any sort of change, there's always a little bit of friction in there trying to get someone to agree to something new and different, which there's all the reasons why they think it might not work. But now looking back, you're like, see, we knew it would have an impact here in a positive way. If someone else is hearing this, okay, we want to follow in your footsteps, Sarah. We want to create a process that maybe shortens that down, is a little more valuable for the candidate, speeds it up for the company. What are 2 or 3 things that they might could do to adapt from the sort of serial sort of interviews that we've always done into a more consolidated approach? What can they do?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny, letting go of the individual hiring decisions, that's a little uncomfortable, right? When you're used to hiring talent for your own team, relinquishing that and trusting this panel that we've now established to interview and make the hiring decisions, it was an adjustment. And one thing we did when obviously we created our business case. So we pulled our data points, we pulled what are our challenges that we're facing, what are we trying to solve for, and what can this help us with? And then we started to pull together some stats on what we would expect to see if we implemented this in terms of improving time to fill from applicant to our start dates. And then I think what's really important is identify your key stakeholders. So once you have that data together, figure out where you need to socialize that, where you need to run the idea by people, get feedback, work that into your process. And then with your key stakeholders, take it to them and see if you have their support. And if you do, when you then go start to carry that into larger audiences or larger groups of leaders, you have your advocates to help you champion the cause as you're starting to share this across the organization. For us, that was a critical step, identifying the stakeholders, making sure we had their support, and then bringing that into our other conversations. The second thing we did initially is we proposed it as a pilot. Don't come in and say, we're just going to implement this and this is the way it is. It's, hey, we'd like to try this. These are the benefits we think we can see from it, but we're going to continue to monitor, evaluate. We're going to come back and share that with you. And then we can make a decision on if we continue to implement this model or if we need to then adjust what we're doing.
Excellent. Great advice there. I've written those. So for anyone who's not taking notes, I did, don't worry. So trust that panel, get them to trust that panel. You got to really get them to believe in the people around them, create the business case, identify your stakeholders, propose a pilot, which is a sneaky way to say, we're going to try this out just to make sure it works and get everybody else on board. And if we fail small, fine. But if we succeed small, we get a chance to try it on a bigger scale. So I love that approach there. And it gives comfort to the other side. If they're like, I'm not sure about this, you're not putting all your all the chips on the table and betting it all on black. You're saying, let's try this out and we'll see what happens. One of the conversations I had with someone earlier today, an HR executive, I said, listen, we've got to look at this not as if it doesn't work, this is not an indictment on the recruiting team. This is a process improvement exercise. We're trying to figure out the best approach that's going to lead to better outcomes, not just for you, hiring manager, or me, recruiter, or candidate, but for every single one of us as we're trying to move forward and solve these problems. And again, technical talent, you've said it a couple of times. I'll say it again, high demand, hard to compete on that front. And so anything we can do to optimize that, even if it's just 10% better, that's going to increase our chances of getting that one candidate we might not otherwise would have.
Absolutely. Yeah. And lucky for us, as we thought, we saw some early wins and immediately started to see some improvement in the data, which helped us continue to carry that story forward.
Excellent. All right. So if someone has listened to this and someone wants to connect with you, Sarah, learn more about the work that you are doing and the team at Enterprise is doing and really helping to create great experiences there, are you okay if they reach out with you on LinkedIn and connect?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. I would welcome that.
Okay, perfect. To everybody else out there, hope you got some good notes, some good ideas from this conversation. I know, as I've already mentioned, I have some great ideas, both on the internship side, as well as speeding up the hiring process. There were some really creative ideas there. Stay tuned for more good stuff coming right up. All right, George, I've already agreed to get out of the way because he's over here like bouncing in his chair, he's been taking his own notes over here, like pumped up about this. Sarah, by the way, thank you so much. We appreciate you. Love your passion for this. And I'll get out of the way. George, what were your takeaways?
I think the value of that conversation, obviously, with the impact, whether it's mentorship, I've seen we talk about mentorship. I was in, somebody was in the DM on LinkedIn, was like, hey, does this align? Because we did mentorship last year with our mentees, with our HR summer school. And I think a lot of the internship and mentorship benefits are so impactful. And I just share those three, I'll share them here as well. I think some of the key impacts when it comes to hiring interns and establishing that relationship, number one is really what it does from a fresh perspective. I always think hiring new talent, younger, older, middle, whatever we always talk about the debate of, I just hate the whole generational talk. It's just, we're people. Yes. And does age make a difference? It is, but it's a number as well. And experience is a key. I understand that, but fresh perspectives and those innovating ideas, what you gain from those, from those hands-on, even just something different outside of the box. We always talk about culture fit. Does it fit our business? But really, how do we really enhance and elevate our business? We're talking about business growth. And remember, number one rule of business is to stay in business. Yes. And part of staying in business is being able to have fresh perspectives and being able to be innovative. The second thing that really stuck out with me is that what it does to your talent pipeline, the impact that it does there. Because then again, it's word of mouth. It's a new, Sarah will love this if she's there, and still a new stream of marketing. Right. When you have fresh interns, that talent pipeline and recruitment strategies that come with that. And it's just an additional add-on. It's something that you can also have with your team as well. And then the third thing that it really does for me that I kind of stuck out with this is in those conversations is the increase of productivity. And how that really elevates things. When you have fresh perspectives, you got new ideas and new strategies that come with that. The impact that it goes with that talent is great. And then also you're developing interns as well in-house that get to know. One of the things that I loved about the conversation was the coffee with the CEO chat and having that experience where you're bringing in interns. So connecting, whether it's high schools, a lot of high schools now are having those vocational career courses. Yes. Where you're able to do those. Those are easy opportunities to be able to connect to, as well as college interns. I know, especially in the health field and the medical field, especially with doctors or dentists, I have family members that are both in those and manage, networks. And they're real big on the internship there, being able to connect with students. And so there's many opportunities. My favorite personally is being able to connect with students coming straight out of high school, because now a lot of high schools are also having those, elective courses in college. Oh, yeah. And so they're getting some experience, but the hands-on experience they'll get working with you to be able to take that then to college if they do so, or even say, hey, maybe college is something I can do online, and through this internship be able to fulfill that job or be able to put that perspective, especially if you find a candidate like Ben coming straight out of high school. Hold on to those Bens as long as you can. And the cost efficiency, there's a financial benefit as well, to be able to have that internship or mentorship program within your job.
Yeah, we actually have overtime at different times. I've worked with interns here at Lighthouse. And so it's been fun for me because I find someone who's like loves data, loves writing, loves HR, one of those things or all of those things, and find ways to get them plugged into what's happening. Like, listen, this is not your typical HR job, but it's also going to give you insight into all the things that all of you are dealing with every single day. So love that. Awesome. Wonderful. Well, again, Sarah, thank you. Appreciate you, Rocky, and the team for supporting the event. We have one more conversation with our friends over from Indeed. So I'm going to be talking to Raj. They've been working on this new thing. It just actually was announced this week. So this is brand new, hot off the presses. They have some new tools that allow employers to connect with candidates, to get them into the hiring funnel, to engage them. And you'll hear in a little bit how effective that is compared to a typical job seeker out there looking through your list of jobs, clicking through what happens. You'll hear some of those things there. So we'll hear from Raj, and then we're going to put my agenda back up for you. We're going to hear from him, and then we're going to transition back over. George and I, the George and Ben show. We're going to go through, we're going to share some data. We're going to give you some stories. I've tried to be really specific. Like someone was mentioning a minute ago that they were, and I'm sorry, I'm forgetting your name off the top of my head. Someone said that this is a to-do list for them coming to the events because there's ideas that come out here. One of the things I said is we tried to do a good job of giving you some ideas on things to do. I don't want to just give you data and then say, good luck. I want to give you some data and say, here's some things you can do about that. Here's how you use that. Here's how you implement that into your work. That's why we have conversations like the ones you just heard with Sarah on things that are very practical and ways that you can change and adapt your processes to be more connected, more human, and hopefully in some cases to relieve some of the burden on us. We heard some of the interview, the group interview conversation with Sarah there. She's talking about reducing some of their burden as well and making it easier on candidates, win-win in every case. So let's go ahead and start this conversation with Raj from Indeed. We're going to hear what they're doing, support employers, and then we'll come back, do our research release, share some data with all of you. We will do some giveaways. I've got a laundry list here. Stay active in the comments, stay active in the chat. Let us know. Again, we're seeing those of you who are on YouTube commenting in. If you're wherever you happen to be, let us know your thoughts. What's working? Ask questions. We want you to stay connected in, and we'll be giving some giveaways at the very end of the session today. Without any further ado, let's jump out of the way and get to this conversation with Raj up and running. I'm so glad you're here with us and have been, I know you've been enjoying the content, the ideas, the encouragement today about some of the big challenges and trends we're seeing across the entire TA landscape. And I'm so thrilled to have with me here, Raj Mukherjee from Indeed. We're going to talk about some of the work that they're doing, supporting employers, supporting candidates, and creating better connections and relationships and helping to speed up hiring, all of that good stuff. Raj, I'm so glad you're here with me. Welcome to the conversation.
Thanks, Ben, for inviting me. Really, really glad to be here.
Absolutely. So before we get to some of the good stuff we're going to talk about, what you and the team have been building behind the scenes, tell us more about who you are, what you do, please.
Yeah, I run what we call employer products at Indeed, and I've been with Indeed for 7.5 years, based out of Austin, Texas. And the whole focus of Indeed, as you know, is we help people get jobs, and my job is to help employers hire those people.
That seems like a fun opportunity, helping people get the opportunities for careers they've been looking for, helping employers fill a desperately needed gap, trying to find the right talent. So that's really exciting. So you have this front row seat. You're talking with all these employers, you're supporting and serving them on a regular basis. What are some of the big challenges and things that you're seeing and hearing from the companies you're serving today?
Yeah, Ben, the hiring process is really, really challenging. And it sounds weird, like we're a hiring company and we've been at it for a while, but I would be honest, it's still very challenging, very inefficient, and too much time is wasted on manual tasks. And we just recently ran Harry's poll survey, and I'll share some stats with you that are just mind-boggling. 64% of hiring managers believe sourcing qualified talent is very challenging. And if it's about almost 100% if you include the word somewhat challenging, right? So pretty much like everyone finds it to be somewhat challenging. It takes hiring managers on average, and I'm talking recruiters, hiring managers as a whole segment of population we're looking at, on average of 13 hours per role to source enough quality candidates that lead to a hire. And this kind of connects very nicely to another data point, which is it takes more than 50 days on average to hire for a role. So you can think about it, like a big part of, I'm a recruiter, I'm being asked to hire for 10 roles, I'm spending more than 3 weeks just to get enough quality candidates. Not even like the conversation, not even making sure that, hey, is this person really going to be ultimately going to the next step? None of that. No human connection. Just finding those people. It's taking that long. So it's a very, very manual and painful process right now.
Goodness. I'm thinking through those challenges there. And again, we've heard already from some of the other conversations today. We're hearing from other recruiters, other recruiting and talent acquisition leaders, some of their things that they're thinking about. And I know that we consistently see in our own data as well, like trying to find the right people. That's always a challenge. And companies really would like to focus on things like quality of hire and other metrics, but they're still hung up in this very inefficient process, as you mentioned, and it just keeps them from focusing on the things that they know matter. They know that's important, but they get hung up in the details and trying to create those relationships, trying to really create some predictability in their hiring overall, right? When hiring is unpredictable, it creates this negative chain of events down the line, and we can't support our processes, we can't support the business needs, and TA is always playing catch up. Essentially, it feels like that based on some of those kinds of things you're sharing.
That's exactly right. They are playing catch up, and oftentimes what ends up happening is, I mean, there's another stat for you that'll probably blow your mind. Like, we spend more than $4,500 per role in hiring. Right? That's a pretty large number, and it still takes 50+ days.
Yes.
So it's not like people are not spending money. They are spending money. They're probably just not spending money at the right places in the right way, such that it should get the value. And so that's really what we are trying to do. We are trying to make hiring simple, much simpler, much faster, and much more human.
Well, speaking of human, so one of the things that we also see, we do a lot of research with candidates and try to understand what's going on there. And we hear from them consistently, hey, we are frustrated by this hiring process. Companies are dragging things out. Talk about some of the things that you hear, because again, Indeed is the destination for candidates who are looking for jobs. You interact with many of them as well. What are some of the issues that they have found?
Yeah, I mean, ever since I've joined Indeed, there's a term that has stuck with me, and probably you know this term very well as well, the black hole problem. So I apply to a job, I never hear back. And the black hole problem also exists on the employer side, believe it or not. I apply to a candidate, source a candidate, never hear back. That also happens, but particularly so on the job seeker side. 80% have applied to a job and have never heard back. Like, that's a pretty stark number.
Yes.
And that number has gotten maybe a little bit better, but not really by that much. And then on the sourcing side, because we're talking about all these problems from the employer side as well, 40% of workers or job seekers have been contacted by a company for a job that was not right for them. And so, like, just make that 40, like, let's take half, let's just use that term. Half of the contacts are for jobs that I don't want. So it's not a surprise that when I do get something that is of interest, probably there's so much noise, I'm not even paying attention to it. That's what's happening. Like, on the employer side, on the job seeker side, they're both getting frustrated. It's a negative cycle that's getting created. More people are applying to more jobs. They're not hearing back. More employers are reaching out to the candidates that are not a good fit for the job. So candidates are getting frustrated. So in a sense, what ends up happening is we have this situation where the entire process grinds to, I wouldn't call it a halt because it definitely can hire, but definitely grinds to a slow pace.
Yes. The snail's pace, basically, right? It's barely creeping and crawling along, and
exactly,
hiring managers are frustrated, candidates are frustrated, recruiting teams are frustrated, and we're all, what is the answer here? And as you said, these things are cumulative. It's not like this problem happens over here. If we're trying to get candidates to apply for jobs that aren't a fit for them, trying to get them to participate in those, and they are applying for other jobs that may or may not be a fit for them, like, all those things create that black hole problem and make it worse, make it so much more painful for everyone involved. One of the things that struck me, you shared the stat where candidates applied, employers haven't responded back. One of the things that we saw in our research last year is that about half of candidates said after they've actually had a conversation with the company or the recruiter, the company wouldn't respond back to them after that. And again, that's egregious in my opinion, because we've already invested a little time. If I'm a candidate, have a little respect. We've already talked together. It's not like I'm just a random person. We've already had some sort of interaction. Just say, hey, not the right fit. Okay, fine. But at least then I'll know.
Yeah. And I personally think transparency in the hiring process is one of the core tenets that we need to make it more transparent. I'm not saying you share something that hurts the other person. That's not required. But everybody appreciates a very candid piece of feedback that says there are lots of good strengths that you have, but here's a couple of things we were looking for and you don't have it right now. That's okay.
Yes.
Like, that's a human thing.
Yes.
Not everybody has everything. And so that was not a great match. So that's my belief.
I bet you just got like all the virtual applause from the audience out here from you saying that, because so many of us believe in the transparency of just being able to share back. And again, sometimes it's timing. I was talking to an executive TA leader yesterday. She said, listen, you may be in the best candidate, but we just extended an offer yesterday. And so you're not going to get this position, even if you were the very best candidate in the entire pipeline. And so timing, all these things come into account. And it's as simple as saying, hey, we think you're a very strong candidate. We'd love to keep you in the loop for the next time we have an opening like this. Would you be okay with that? And most of the time they are, absolutely. As long as you're communicating, it's not a, hey, 6 months after the fact saying, hey, that position was way closed long time ago. Are you okay with it? No, that's strange. But
Yeah,
within that some sort of reasonable period, they're okay with that. They're perfectly fine.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, yes. Let's leave it at that. Let's leave it at that.
Okay. So we talked about the problems on the candidate side. We talked about the problems on the employer side. And like, again, everybody's a little bit frustrated or a lot frustrated by this, depending on who you asked. What is Indeed doing to help adapt and put this technology into the hands of employers to create some better experiences on both sides of that equation?
Yeah, so for a while, we have had this product called Resume Search, which searches across 250 million plus active resumes on our database. Like these are resumes that we have on our system. But it does require the very traditional way of searching through the database. We have lots of filters that we give people, starts with very simple filters such as location, but you also give people things such as years of experience, whether the candidate was active or not, all those things we are giving as part of this. But it's still very manual, and it contributes to the 13 plus hours that I just talked about in sourcing the candidates. We, in the meanwhile, created another product called Matched Candidates. And Matched Candidates is essentially matching automatically the job with the best candidates for that job. So if you post a job and you said, hey, I'm going to post a job for a nurse in Austin, Texas. I need 5 years of emergency room experience. I need an ACLS certification. Obviously, it's a nurse. You need a registered nurse license. All those things I require as part of my job. And you post that job on Indeed. And like automatically, like immediately, instantly, we'll show you a list of candidates that are in our candidate database that are a good match. Like people who have been active, people who have the criteria, the job criteria. Obviously, they're registered nurses. They may have worked in hospitals that you have sourced from earlier. So all of these things, they're connected, and we show you. And then you can reach out to those candidates. And so this two products were disjointed. And we thought search and recommendations are really need to be connected. And we called the new product, where we are bringing this together, smart sourcing. And you might say like, okay, Raj, like what's so smart about it? Well, and the most important thing, really the most important thing is the amount of work you need to do to find the candidates, the quality candidates that you want to have a human connection with. We are doing the heavy lifting. We took everything away and just said, what is the most important thing we are doing? We're using AI and machine learning and all the feedback loop you're giving us, all the data that we are collecting from job seekers, from employers, the preferences and qualifications from job seekers, their skills, and same story on the job seeker, on the employer side, all the data you have given us through the jobs, you're connecting those two and creating the best possible matches without you having to do any work. And then once you find those candidates, we make it like really easy, like super easy for you to see why this candidate would be a good fit for your job. Like through candidate highlights, and that's also AI powered. We'll show you like, here are the things your job says. Here's why we think this candidate is a great fit. Here's what your job says. This candidate may be missing these things. You should ask these as you reach out. And then the best part, we actually create, like literally create smart messages for you that are personalized for that job seeker, where you can say, I find all these things great about you. There's a couple of questions I have. Would you mind getting on a call with me? Automatically. So all of these things we're creating, like, yes, maybe some of these pieces exist in silos, but building an end-to-end experience that has AI inbuilt in all of this, and AI should serve the purpose. Like I think everybody talks about AI. For me, AI is just a tool. Ultimately, it should serve the human purpose of finding the best candidates and creating that human connection. And that's what we are really doing.
This encourages me so much because in our research, we've actually asked candidates in the past, would you be okay with companies using AI in the hiring process? And the number one way they said, yes, please do this, employers, is help match me to jobs that are relevant to my skills. And this is exactly what you're talking about here. The candidates are actually asking for this, and they're hoping for that kind of connection to be created. And you're talking, this sounds like I've got an assistant sitting here like doing the work for me. I was a recruiter in the past. I'm like, goodness, all those things you talked about, each one of those builds up into the 13 hours to source a role you mentioned earlier. Like all those things we're doing, if this cuts that time down to a fraction of that, what else can we spend our time on? Like building relationships with the right candidates, or following back up, or actually having time to say, hey, you didn't get this role, but the next one is, we want to see you apply for that.
Totally. Like exactly the kind of stuff that we were saying are frustrating to the candidate and ultimately leads to a bad brand experience, because we are all trying to optimize ultimately for the best candidate experience. And if that doesn't happen, because all you're doing is trying to find the candidates, forget the candidate experience.
By the time we find you, we got to herd you through this process as fast as possible, just so we don't lose you to someone else. That's how we end up getting stuck as employers. I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier, because I think that was important, and you like breezed by like it was nothing, but I think the audience would really hear more about this. You talked about when it brings you up a candidate and you're doing this, it tells you why it selected them, why they're important as a candidate, what sort of factors that it's all about them. Talk about the importance of that, because I feel like when I'm trying to pick someone, sometimes some of the AI tools out there are like, well, here's your list, and there's no explanation. And I'm concerned, like, how do I know these are the right ones? But you talked about it gives you some plain language so you understand that.
Totally. So we call it AI-powered candidate highlights. I think of it as a summary of the candidate's qualifications.
Okay.
So highest level reasons why somebody might be overlooked, right? So you might say it's a 5 years of experience, and that's what I need. But really, do you really need 5 years of experience? There's a lot of people who have been hired with 4.5 or 4 years of experience. So what we will say is, your job requires 5 years of experience. This candidate has only 4. And we will show you research that says you should actually give this candidate a chance. Like this might be, and so slowly nudging employers to understand they might be missing out on really good candidates. Same story, like another example I give, this is, I call it the paper ceiling. And the paper ceiling is nothing but your degree. Like there are lots of jobs that don't require a college degree. Yet the job description highlights the need for a college degree. We say it's equivalent, but we don't really care about the equivalency. But somebody might have all the experience you need. You should give them a chance. And so we might highlight, you required a college degree, but really, do you need one? Because this person has had 10 years of experience doing all this stuff. You should give them a fair chance. So I think it's just ultimately for us, it's making hiring fairer and more equitable, and also helping the employer not miss out on great candidates. The speed to hire, or time to hire, however you say it, that's the name of the game. So how do we help people do that?
I talked to a talent acquisition leader, it's been a while back now, but one of the things that he said stuck with me. He said, we are about looking at our hiring processes and optimizing, like you're talking about here. It's like we're optimizing to remove the barriers, but without lowering the bar. Like we still want someone quality, someone who's good. But if there's a barrier in there, like a degree requirement that's not really necessary, or hey, 5 years is dropping off a couple of really good candidates, let's move it to 4 years and consider them. Like those are barriers that are not really required in the process overall. And again, you said this a minute ago, like that thing says requires a degree or requires X years of experience. It's because someone copied and pasted that from the thing that someone created 10 years ago, not because someone needs that today necessarily.
Totally. So, hiring as a system has not progressed enough. And what we are trying to do is challenge the beliefs that we have held for a long time. Not saying they're wrong, because some of those things, there's a reason why they were there. But simply nudging and helping an employer understand, like, hey, you're going to miss out on 2 awesome candidates. Do you really want to just take a quick peek at them? And if it meets everything else, maybe 4.5 years is good enough.
One of the stats that I heard from you on this blew me away. How much more responsive is a candidate when they get this sort of personalized outreach than someone who just sees the job out there in a job listing?
It's a great question. It's a really, really good question, Ben. And let me take a minute to give that match recommendations like capability that you just described. So you come to Indeed, you post a job, or you have your job on Indeed through your ATS. Through the job description, through all the data that we have around it, we show you a list of matched candidates. And then you're like, okay, I like these 5 candidates. And you're reaching out to them. The candidates receive it, and then they apply to the job. Very simple process. You'd be like, okay, Raj, they could also have found the job on their own and they could have applied. What's the big deal? Here's the big deal. When I, as a recruiter, reach out to these candidates from our match candidates experience, they're 17 times more likely, like literally 17 times more likely to apply to the job than if they found the job on their own. And the big deal here is like everybody wants to be wanted, but you want to be wanted by the right person for the right job. There's no point in just being wanted for anything.
Yes.
You want to be wanted for the right thing. And that's what we are doing. That's the secret sauce. It's matching the human with another human using the AI underneath.
So I love this. Again, I'm so excited about it. I'm looking at these things through the filter of when I was recruiting, would this have added value to me? Would it have added value to our hiring managers and to the candidates in the process? And I'm definitely like checking the boxes on this. I'm so excited about it. If someone wants to learn more about this new release and some of the smart sourcing capabilities, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, we will send you a link. I think it'll have everything. But to your listeners, both and to you, like we will have a lot of information coming out very soon on this, but also we'll send you the link to learn more.
Okay, perfect. Raj, this has been so much fun. I've enjoyed it. I've got some good ideas and takeaways, and I'm hoping everybody else out there is inspired and excited as I am to think about taking some of those menial, tedious things off of our plate so we can focus on building better candidate relationships. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Ben, for inviting me, please.
Absolutely. To everybody else out there, stay tuned for more good stuff coming right up. All right. Goodness. Thanks, Raj, again, for joining us, for sharing insights there. Again, it excites me. I remember, I don't know if I told him this before we started recording together, but I said, I remember the old days of Indeed. I was using it as a recruiter way back when if you put a pay rate into a job posting, they would actually block your account or ban your account because it would get all these clicks through. And now when you're adding a job posting to Indeed, they're like, hey, by the way, you probably should add some pay data to that, whether it's required or because it's just more likely a best practice now. So I'm like, we've come full circle in the time since I was recruiting day to day. But I love some of the data there, like relevant outreach matters. And again, we'll hear some more about some of those kinds of things in the conversation today. So again, congrats to the Indeed team on the new release. And thanks for Raj for joining us. Bring our quick agenda back up for you because we are ahead of schedule if you have not noticed. So we are
Look at that.
Extra. I mean, look at that. It's a first, I think, for us. We have extra time today. So we've got some good stuff set aside for you. We may finish a few minutes early for you, give you a little bit of time back in your day, which I think we'll all be grateful for. We're going to dive into some research. We're going to share with you some of the findings, and it's going to go kind of two parts. The first part, employer data. We're going to go into some of the findings from talent leaders like you, recruiting executives, recruiting leaders, HR leaders who wear that recruiting hat, like I say all the time. Those people responded to the survey. And then we're also going to hear from the candidate side, some of the findings, some of the data there. So just to give you a quick preview of this, I didn't ask 10 of my best friends. It's 1,200 plus companies in this data set, and then about 1,000 global candidates as well. So we'll have a good representative sample from around the world, what's happening, and we'll give you some of those insights here. So you ready to dive in?
Born ready.
All right. Lovely. Lovely. Let's make it happen. Okay. So let me get my stuff all set here and perfect. So let's start off with a couple of things. Actually, that's my wrong one. There's your live stream snafu for the day. This is employers, not candidates, but we'll dive into this. So really quickly, I want to give you this preview because I've been sharing this with HR leaders for the last few weeks, and it kind of blows their minds when they see this. There's this new tool out there called Final Round AI. You can go and Google it if you want to. And it's a way for candidates to sort of cheat in an interview. It gives them the answers to the test. So you're sitting there doing a Zoom interview with someone, you ask them a question, and that system listens and then gives them a script on what to say back. So in that 2 or 3 seconds while they kind of ponder, it generates an answer, and then they just read that off the screen like it's their own answer. And they sound very prepared, very capable, like they're the great interviewee, and they're using a tool like this. So what we're seeing in the data is that the majority of candidates are using tools like ChatGPT and things like this to help them sort of game the interview or be better at applying or help rewrite my resume to fit this job posting. And because of that, we have to be using tools that help us automate some of the work we have to do, or we're going to fall behind. Because if resumes already are hard to shuffle through, how much harder are they going to be to shuffle through when they all start to look and sound the same? So really quickly, I know George and I both have used ChatGPT in some of the work that we do as writing and summarizing and generating content and all that good stuff. We asked employers, have your teams been using tools like this? And so You out there, welcome to chime in if you're using it, or if you've kind of dabbled in it, or if you're like, I'm not sure yet. Whichever camp you're in, you could chime in here in the chat. But we have a large number of companies. Absolutely, we're going all in. We're using it across the team to make us faster, better, more personal. But then others are saying, not yet, or not consistently across the board. So it will be my encouragement to you to be thinking about ways to use those tools. And again, I do a lot of teaching, speaking on this topic. If you're ever curious and want to know more, ping me. I'm happy to give you some ideas and examples on this. But these tools can help us to be more tailored, more personalized, and more connected to our employees and able to get more stuff done at the same time, which is kind of a best of all worlds. All right. So beyond automation, one of the other big things we're seeing on the employer side is onboarding. You probably heard me reference that talking to Sarah Reynolds. But when we ask employers across the entire span of anything that could be a priority for you, what are you focusing on most this year? And onboarding came out as number one. And that's never happened in our study as the number one TA priority. And so I wanted to give you a couple of recommendations on that, some ideas if you're thinking about it. No, Joy, I got your name this time. I was looking back and George kind of flagged it for me. Joy, you had mentioned that you're going to work on your onboarding because of some ideas you heard today. Only 15% of the companies that we surveyed have this very personalized sort of approach. And so I'm going to share a couple of examples with you, things to do. You've already heard some in the conversation today, but some ideas that I've seen be really interesting and effective. And then I ask you to chime in. If there's anything that's top of mind for you, like, yeah, absolutely do that. So number one, think about your company's origin story. If you're a newer company, if you're a legacy company, you've been around for 100 years, there's a story there. There's a connection. If you're brand new, there's a story there. There's a connection. There's a reason that the company's there. And helping people connect in and feel like they understand that mission and understand the vision and how they fit into the bigger picture helps to create connections from the very beginning. Even before they start with you, you can start building that in to maybe how you interview them or how you talk about the company in the early outreach, those kind of things. So really help them know your origin story so they feel like they see where they fit into that bigger picture. Think about culture and talk about that in behavioral terms. Did you twitch a little bit once that culture over there? Maybe a little bit. Culture in behavioral terms, not just saying, oh, these are our values and they're important to us. But when we say be on time every time, here's what we mean by that. Here's what that looks like in practice. Give examples of your employees and how they've done that. I had a chance recently to interview Holly. Her last name I'm struggling with, but I interviewed Holly from Wolf, the company Wolf. And we were talking about some of the things they do. And she said, we really are careful about talking about our culture in a way that people can hear and picture in their head. So when they're out there working, they know what we're looking for. Number three, we've heard from George already, clubs, connections, interests, find ways to connect people. The more connection points they have at your company, the more they will feel like they're part of that. And that includes if they're hybrid, remote, virtual, or if they're on site, all of those still matter. We've heard of the manuals already. I won't beat that one up anymore. The last one here, though, I heard this company recently that this was their approach, and it's kind of a choose your own adventure, if you will, for the new hire. So when someone comes in, first day, they get a list of five different job titles in the company, and they get to pick which one of those people they want to have lunch with during that first week. And the company pays for it, but it's a way to help that person say, you know what, I'm kind of curious what the marketing leader does. I want to meet with them, or I'm curious about how operations works. I want to meet with them. And they get a chance to start directing a little bit what they're doing. And again, you can adapt that. Maybe it's 2, maybe it's three times or something like that. Give them some options though, and let them pick versus here's all the things we've already set and established for you. There's already a lot of that in place. Let them have a little bit of control and flexibility over what they want to do as part of that. Anything for you, George, on the onboarding and connecting new people in?
Yeah, I want to just pinpoint what you said, the number one, and that's the original story. Mm-hmm. And I think the key behind that, and companies that do it real well, and specifically when I'm connected with Round Room, Round Room has 5 or 6 different entities, Verizon, TCC being their largest of those. And one of the things that is done so well is telling the heartbeat behind it. Scott Moorhead, the CEO of Round Room, one of the things that he always talks about, we talk about these things, especially when it comes to culture and have engaging, he no longer wants engaging employees or engaging recruits. He wants effective. He wants them to be very effective of who they are and what they do. That matters just as much as them being engaged, because we can engage them through their strengths and talents. And so one of the ways that they do that is through the storytelling. And part of that story and the original story of the why then becomes aligned with what they do as a company. When you do that, it goes back to what you said, number 2, which I got excited because there's an alignment there. When people know the heart of why you started and what you're doing in the company. And a lot of that is how do you align your core values in the recruiting process? We have
Mhm.
core values and mission statements, and I believe if you allow people to understand the heart behind who you are and why you are with those core values, and so people say, how do we get our story out there to people? Talk about your core values and how you live up to them. In Round Room, they got rid of the word core values and they became promises. So we have 5 promises. I promise that I'm going to care for you, our customers, and our community. How do we show that we care? Through showing up right for each other, through making sure that if somebody is carrying a box of something and they're trying to get to the door, I care enough to think about the complications of opening up the door. So there's many ways to share, show that you care. Driving the business. How do we drive the business? Well, if you're struggling with something, and I have maybe some experience, it's not my title now, but I have some experience in what you're doing, maybe supporting that teammate, and again, showing up for that person, and how that really impacts the culture, behavior overall. I start to believe that Ben cares about the core values because he's not only talking about them, but he's actually living these shared values out. And so part of that original story is telling your story, but aligning them with your story, with your core values, and how we as a company and organization live those things out. And that becomes an accountability piece, right? Because if George doesn't just show he cares, or hey, George, the way you treated Ben today, I didn't feel like you cared, right? Then it becomes that triple effect of the culture of communication, the culture of accountability that we have within so those improvements, especially for new hires, because we know the rule with new hires now, they're going to know whether or not they're going to stay with their company. That it's not going to be 60 days. It's not going to be 90 days. It's not going to be 2 days. It's 5 days. They're making a decision whether or not they're going to stay with your company. And a lot of these is based on the beginning process of recruiting, what you said, the picture that you painted, and how it does or does not align with what the true value is. And so making these simple improvements, creating that connectability and that transparency. I really love that word, connectability.
I think you do.
I'm taking my ability and I'm connecting it with the business. And so a story coming soon.
I like it. I like it. Goodness. There we go. Okay, I'm not even going to comment on that one anymore. All right, let's dive in. So great stuff on onboarding, getting them connected. I told you I'd give you some practical ideas there. There you go. Now, one of the other things we've heard a couple of times in the conversation today is around data. I'm not trying to shiver a little bit. Data and having metrics and having a story to tell around that. How do we know if we're doing the right things? If we're doing a lot of work and we're going in the wrong direction, it's not helping anybody. It's not making our jobs better. It's not making the company better. And it's not serving the candidates or our hiring managers either. So we asked employers, what hiring metrics are you using? And we also asked a separate question to split them out. So you see 2 different groups here. One group said, we are kind of passive. We just sit back. If someone needs a requisition filled, we'll fill that for them. But we're not looking for ways to really partner with the business. We're just taking requisitions and putting people in seats. The other group here on the right side of this chart is organizations who are like, I'm looking for ways to partner. I'm listening to George, the hiring manager, about what he's looking for and saying, you know what, we actually had a candidate 6 months ago that applied. Let me go and find them and see what they're doing. Really looking for ways to be proactive about that. And so what we see here, the number one metric that employers say matters, number one that you're using is quality of hire. We've heard that a couple of times in the discussions today. Quality of hire comes down to how are you performing on the job? What does a hiring manager think about you after you've been there for a little while? And are you staying? Are you sticking around? If you quit in 30 days, probably not a very good fit in terms of quality. We missed something there in the interview process. So companies who are leading, who are proactive, you see them using every one of these metrics pretty much more often than the other group. That's an encouragement to you. And if you're like, well, goodness, we're not measuring most of these things, or we're not sure how to measure some of these things, I'll tell you, one of the things you can do, I would encourage you to do, is start measuring one of them. And if you're not sure which one of them matters most to your leadership team, spend a little time, give them some options, let them tell you what matters. Then start reporting on that on a regular basis. Once that becomes part of the rhythm of what you do, then you can add in other ones. And again, take cues from them. Don't just grab one that you think sounds cool. Take one from them. Most companies use time to fill because it's pretty easy to subtract a hire date from a start date for the requisition, but that may not be the most valuable thing for you. And we saw a comment earlier. Someone said you can either hire fast or you can hire well. And with, again, I'm missing the name here. I apologize, but high five to you on that one because that was a great, great comment. Okay, so let's skip ahead a little bit. No, actually, I'm not going to skip ahead. So I talked about AI a minute ago. I'm going to come back to it for just a second because I think this matters. So one of the things we see in the data is that about 4 in 10 companies tell us they have fewer recruiters today than they did a few years ago because they're using AI tools to be more efficient, to be more effective. And some companies were kind of caught up in layoffs for recruiting, or their recruiting headcount slowed down or stopped. And so they had to find some way to bridge that gap, but they're using this as a way. One of the things that we see is the first areas that got automated out for most companies was if you had people on your team that were scheduling interviews, again, larger organizations, someone's scheduling, Calendly and all the tools like that. Now self-scheduling, that just kind of takes care of that. That's not needed anymore. But we're also seeing companies that are using it for sourcing and for other things like that, and digging up new candidates. And so employers that are doing that, I don't fault them for it, but there's a point where you can go too far, automate too much, and it starts cutting into the value that you can bring. So that's my encouragement to you, is be careful about how much or what you're willing to automate, because at some point you're automating things that are very human facing, human connected. You're going to start dropping the ball at some point. The algorithm can never be quite as connected or as engaging as someone like George is. All right. So for those companies that are using automation to some degree, though, they say that they're more effective, more efficient. And so I asked them, what are you doing with that freed up time? And here's how they're redirecting their teams, their time and effort with that freed up time. Number one, building relationships, interacting with candidates, interacting in person, interacting virtually, really trying to find those people who are superstar candidates, or maybe they were a silver medalist for another job. They were didn't make it for this much. They were missing on their resume, but next time we'll hire them. Those kind of candidates are critical for your company, and they're spending more time investing into rebuilding those relationships, keeping them fresh and warm for when you need them. The second way, tied back to that metrics piece a minute ago, is more time on proving to the business the value we're bringing. Here's how what we're doing in the hiring practices and hiring processes aligns with the value of the business and what the company's trying to accomplish. Number one rule of business is stay in business, as you were saying, George. And so connecting those things together really matters. If you don't have a good line of sight on how hiring affects that, again, you can have a coffee with some of your leadership and ask them about that, and they can give you some insight into what it means, what it costs them if they don't have the right person in the right seat at the right time. So some good stuff there. We're going to talk for a second. I'm going to switch over to assessments, talk for that really quickly, and then we'll transition over to the candidate side and give you some insight there. And again, I'm going kind of quick, and I know we have a lot. We have 170 something slides in the actual data set that we're outputting from this. I'm only sharing like 10% of that with you today because it would probably make all of us cry, even me, who I love data. It would make us all cry to share that with you. We have a new report coming out on it soon. We'll make sure and get a link to all of you when that comes out, but we're trying to give you some of the highlights and some of the big picture things that we're seeing. So we asked employers about how are they doing hiring in a more predictable sort of way. And a majority of them are using assessments as a way to do that. Something that I can ask some questions, get a deeper perspective on someone. And guess what? If they're using that AI tool to game the interview, or they're using an AI tool to rewrite the resume, they're not using it to answer the questions in an assessment. They can't do it for that same reason. It's a little harder to game those things. So when we ask companies, why are you doing that? I know George, like a DEI expert here, the number one reason is we want this to be more fair. We want to be able to get a clearer picture of what Ben is about, of what George is about, of what someone else is about. We don't know what they can bring to the table, so we can judge them based on that, and not based on something else that's an irrelevant factor, right? What school they went to, or where they grew up, or whatever else. Those things don't really matter. The second reason is the candidates that are coming through those, they can pick the ones that are going to be higher quality, and then they can be even quicker about their hiring, which I know some people think assessments drag the hiring process down, and the old legacy ones do, honestly. I remember doing assessments when we were hiring leadership candidates, and we'd have them do this. It wasn't quite paper and pencil, but it was this very disjointed process, took a long time, had to get an IO psychologist to review it, took forever, and drug the process down. And today, some of the more modern ones don't do that, and they're much easier to implement, get out there to your candidates, and give you the same degree of validity and reliability you need. It's from HR nerd terms for you, validity and reliability that you need to pick the right people. So some big things that are happening, employers really thinking about data more, thinking about how to be more structured in their processes, thinking about how to make more predictable hiring decisions. And those are some of the big things, and automation are some of the ones that we're seeing there overall. I promise to let you talk more on the candidate side. Is that fair?
Just a little bit.
Okay. It's funny because when I was talking to you about this, I said, listen, I've been the HR nerd in the relationship here. I've done more of the recruiting, the HR work, all those things that all of you know really well. Manager side, you've worn that side of you've been on that side of the equation, and you've done a lot more of that as a hiring leader and picking people and trying to bring them in than I have. And so it's kind of a fun mix of things. Okay, so we're going to talk about candidates a little bit here. And the two big things I want you to hear as takeaways, the two things that they are telling us time and time again that matter are transparency and relationships. Those things both connect. And the transparency, we'll talk about that more in a little bit. But it's funny, I was talking to, I have twin 13-year-old girls. And so I was talking to them recently and they're like, oh yeah, well, so-and-so made this on a test, or their grade is this in a class. I'm like, you mean you made that? No, someone else did. And what's wild is they now have these apps that they can log into online or they can log into on their phone that show them all of their grades. And because it's right there in the palm of their hand, they can see it anytime. They are sharing more with each other what's going on there. And that used to be a thing for me that was like, I'm not telling anybody what my grade was, good, bad, ugly. I'm not telling anyone, right? It didn't matter what it was. And it's just a different expectation for them now. And so we should expect to see more of that transparency seeping into the workplace because it's being trained into them. If you have access, you can share the information, then they're going to be doing more of that going forward. So
I think the beautiful thing about that too, Ben, is that it's not the transparency on that piece, because Dexter, my kid, is the same way. For me, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking this is competitive. Yeah, I want to know that I got better than you. But really, with Dexter, he's 9 years old. You got your twins that are knocking at the teenage doors.
Oh, they're 13. They're 13, George.
They're excited. I haven't accepted it yet, but they're knocking. I'm to let them in. And so, but with this generation, it's not so competitive driven as if it's for Dexter. He's asking more questions, right? He's more in tune and say, hey, I struggle with reading and that's my best class right now. Maybe I should get extra help. And so knowing where they are, and this goes back into the relationship piece. Do I trust my manager enough to say, hey, I would like growth in this area, more development? And so we talk about the aspects of what this happens, even in the school system, where kids are now be able to see their grades and see their class grades, because it's competitive as a grade, because the best grade at our school, for Dexter School, they get pizza party every month. So the best class, the best grade class, for their testing score. So it's competitive from that standpoint, but individually, then it becomes, how do I get better, right? How do we apply this then in the workplace? Departments, right? Yeah. The KPIs, some of the KPIs within there, and awarding. We talk about those relationships. Don't want to get too far into a different topic, but then it all translates together on how we as a dynamic of human resources connect to, keeping that relationship within the business, because we want to make each other better. I talked about round rooms, 5 promises, driving the business. How do we drive the business? Well, I didn't do so well on this. I was evaluated. I now know because my manager told me how I can get better and be able to grow that way. So transparency, relationships, there's more to it. Let's get back to the data.
That's a great call out, because candidates now have more of an awareness of where they are, where they stand, and they can ask for more. They can push back when they're not sure. I used to have a hiring manager in the past that would wait. He wanted to wait till the 3rd conversation with someone to tell them what the pay range was. And that always irked me. And I'm like, try to feel the candidate out to know early on what's going on. But he was always hardcore. Like, don't tell them what we can pay. Don't tell them what our plans are. You're going to make more people angry or upset than you are.
Waste more time.
Yeah, wasting all of my time trying to get people in there. Like, the best candidates are the ones who are not going to be willing to take whatever rate you're offering there.
Right.
Okay. Speaking of candidates, the number one question we ask candidates every year is, what are the most important factors to you in the company's hiring process? So across the spectrum, lots of things that we can touch on. And here's what we see. And I know George is going to zero right in on number 4 right there, 4th on the list. It's the first time I've asked that question around company culture, but it popped in there pretty high as a priority. But number 1, knowing the starting pay rate is the biggest thing. And it's even, as you can tell, a little bit farther out this year than it was last year. So a lot of employers, candidates want to know what the pay rate is. And that expectation, by the way, based on some of the trends we're seeing, that's going to continue creeping up every year. So if your company is one of those that's not yet sharing some of those things, or as open with that, or it's buried in your hiring process 3 or 4 steps deep, be more willing to share those things, be a little more open with that where you can be, because it's going to help you stand out for the right reasons. I talked to a company, I was speaking at Ohio SHRM last year, and one of the people told me, we're talking about pay transparency and hiring. And do you need a minute?
It's an Ohio thing. You'll see it in the chat here in a second.
It is.
It's a little Ohio thing, OH.
So one of the ladies said, yes, in one of our areas where we're operating, we have to put pay rates on job postings. But another area we don't have to. But she's like, I didn't want to do 2 different things. So I just did it for all of them. And we started getting extra applications in these other markets where we didn't have to do that as a requirement, because we're standing out from the other jobs. So that matters a heck of a lot, and it's going to continue to. This year, we saw like a recruiter that makes you feel appreciated kind of fell down in relation to last year, which was kind of interesting. Most of the other ones were more important. That was one of the ones that was a little bit less important, but I think it comes out because we see hiring managers playing a bigger role in the interview process, in the hiring process, in the early screening, really helping to match those things up. So that one matters. Anything on this before we jump ahead?
No, I mean, what my biggest thing obviously was the new question that we got to ask, of course, is getting a feel for the company culture so that we know that it's right. But also, just again, as we talk about the transparency piece, for me, the second one was important for me because I wasting money is, I grew up doing that, but I've worked hard to be able to make more, and I can get more money. But the respect of the time piece, showing up on time, being there on time, being present, because you can't hold me accountable about my time in the future if you're not respecting my time at the moment. And so being able to respect that time piece, as you're saying, don't wait until number 3 to tell me other details. Being able to be transparent and say, hey, this is who we are, what we're doing, what we're looking for. It saves a lot of time. And so respecting that time is important as well. So, number 2, obviously, but number 4 makes me smile too.
Wonderful. All right. Good stuff. Okay. So one of the things we did this year that we've never done before is we actually ask some questions and can split out the data for those candidates who are actively looking right now, people who are applying for jobs. And if any of you out there have the little thing around your LinkedIn that says I'm looking for work, go ahead and comment in the chat now. Let everybody know in case someone's looking to hire someone. But those people that are looking for work actively versus those that are currently employed, no plans to leave, we asked them some questions about how they feel about the hiring process, what they're looking for, how they want to be communicated to, because I was curious what sort of set those apart. Are there differences in those groups? And as you'd imagine, there's a couple things that do stand out. The first one is how we communicate with them. So those people who are employed currently, they want employers to reach out to them with email, chatbots, LinkedIn, those kinds of things. They're not as interested in SMS or phone calls, probably on a job site somewhere or using a company device even. And so they don't want those things to be tracked, but if they're currently employed, reach out to them via those other methods. That's their preference. Passive candidates told us they want those career growth discussions. They want to hear about that during the hiring process. If that's a commitment or a promise the company's going to make, they want to hear about that early on. But active candidates, interestingly enough, were more likely to say, listen, if I'm looking for a job right now, I'm trying to find a role, I want a company that doesn't just see me for what I am, but for what I could be. What is the future potential? And that one was one of the big things last year. I was trying to work with George on the survey, and I was like, how can we create a question around it, belonging, like employee belonging? So do a lot of research on that. He's like, you can't belong if you're not an employee yet. Darn it. I was hoping that we had a magic answer, but we finally came down to, how can I demonstrate respect for you? How can I show you that I do care about who you are and what you bring? And candidates told us in that data, that's the number one way a company can show respect for them is by seeing them for their potential.
Yeah.
So
that's key. I mean, it's because understanding their potential means that we're having conversations.
Yes.
And you're asking the right questions to be able to see where my heart is and my desire to be within not just the company, but just in general. Where do you want to be? We asked that question, and it used to drive me crazy because I'm like, I don't even know where I'm going to be in 2 weeks, let alone 2 months or 2 years for that matter. But if there was a trigger question of, what do I want to get out of this? That's important to know as far as the development goes. So that's a key question on that connectability, on belonging.
Okay, wonderful. All right. One of the things, belonging, connection, right? Continuing right on that trend. We told you earlier in the conversation, but this is one of the stats that really was encouraging to me because it's sort of validated something that I felt. So again, when I was recruiting, I loved building that connection and helping people. Occasionally they'd ask me a question like, that really is a question for your manager. I'll sit with you if you want to talk to them together so that you're a little more comfortable with that. But 7 in 10 candidates, that person that connected with them initially, that they maintain that relationship. Sorry, I was like, I'm getting choked up over here. They maintain that relationship. And a quarter of those say it's not even like a first few months, it's beyond a year. So they say that matters. And then about 6 in 10 of those, as I mentioned earlier, say this makes them feel more connected to the company overall. So connection starts before they're ever even an employee. That respect we just talked about, seeing their potential starts before they're ever even an employee, and it carries on. And now you talked earlier about transparency, and that's one of the things that sort of stands out to you and the candidate priorities. So I'll show this one up, and then I'll get out of the way and let you talk about it a little bit. Anything that stands out to you here. But we ask candidates what kind of transparency matters. And as you can see here, there's lots of ways to be transparent with them. If your company is one of those that's already doing pay or you're looking for something else to do, here's some ideas. If you're not doing that, that's number one. That's what they ask for more than anything else. But here's some other ideas and ways that you can be open and transparent with them and share what's going on, what's behind the scenes, things that they may want to know to help them feel like they're making a good decision if they're pursuing your company as their next employer, to flip the script a little bit on that. Anything in here stand out to you or interesting, especially?
Yeah, one of the things that stands out as we're talking about, the hiring process is important. And, if I would love to like retool these on how it really kind of flows. But for me, the details about the hiring process, how much time do I need to invest before I know whether or not I'm going to be a yay or a nay, or maybe, or not right now, but in the future, I can see where you may fit.
You're 4 interviews in. You only got 5 more, George.
I know, right?
Committed.
So, during that process, and for me, as I've seen, one of the things that used to push me back when I would get on the phone with a potential candidate was they started interviewing me. They wanted to know questions, right? So my phone screen was over because they answered the questions in that 15-minute slot. But getting those details are important. Knowing those details that saves that time. The other one, obviously, for me that I'm very passionate about, especially right now, and we're seeing a lot more of it, is we're seeing companies talk about that training and growth opportunities, getting into the leadership development aspect of things. So that, one, we can connect and grow, not necessarily to grow that person so they can leave. A lot of people just want to grow and develop. They want to know more. It's not necessarily to take the job of the person that's in front of them. There's a lot of fear in the past where, we don't want to give everything away because they might be my replacement. Yeah. And the reality is that I want to give everything away so they can make my time, just like AI. We talk about the AI thing, and it's like they're not going to. It's AI plus HI. The human intelligence is still going to be needed. It's a relationship. And so just like that, I look at training and growth in the same connection of AI and human intelligence, is that we need each other. And the more I can give to my person on my team and develop them so they can get some experience, the more I'm able to do and develop to be able to lift this lid as we're growing the business. And then in return, my third one, the work flexibility. I love flexibility to know, hey, today I can take a trip and be in person with Ben because of work flexibility, right? Yes. Allows us to do that. And so those three were kind of the ones that really stuck out to me. I know culture and values. Yes. That's to me as a given. That's important. But when it comes to being in that recruiting standpoint, simplicity in the hiring process is the key. And then how we're going to make this person the best them, because the best and healthy them, mentally, emotionally, financially, right? All those things, spiritually, however you may look at it, and developing them and growing them as a person becomes a healthy person within our business.
So I'm going to piggyback off that a little bit and say, I completely agree. And at the same time, there's one person that gets picked, right? There's a lot of people that don't get picked for the job. And so we're being transparent. We're being open with them. Let's continue that theme for just one more. We have 2 more data points to share with y'all, 2 more slides, and then we're gonna start doing some giveaways and some wrap ups in here. But we asked questions for the first time ever. If you aren't picked for this job, what would leave you with a good impression of the company, right? And all of us have been not selected for a job probably at some point in our career, and it may sting a little bit or a lot depending on how much time you spent with them. But the number one thing we see from candidates is transparency. Tell me why I wasn't selected. Was I missing this? Was the lead candidate better at that? Let me know what those are. And as I'm saying that out loud, I know as well, it's hard to have time to do that. It's a lot of companies are risk averse. And they're like, hey, we don't tell people why they weren't picked. We don't want to start a conversation or start this debate about, well, you didn't know this about me. Like, I'm just telling you what candidates are telling us. So if you have a way to say someone else was picked that had a better set of skills than this, or next time you come back to us, hey, if you can fill this gap, we'd love to talk to you again about this opportunity next time this opens up. Even giving them a little bit of insight there can help them feel more confident. And the same thing is true if George applies for an internal role to move up in the organization and I tell him no. If it's just a no, George is probably going to start looking for another job elsewhere. If it's a no, not yet, and I'm talking about what sort of gaps, should have picked me, what sort of gaps George has that he needs to fill, like take this training, build this skill, get to know this mentor. If you get those things in place, then next time around, you're going to be ready for it. That creates a much better outcome and gives them a path to go into versus this sort of weird I don't know what happened or why. And was it me? Was it them? Was it something? Did they make a decision based on something illegal? Like, we don't even know as candidates, and that makes it really tough. So there's your number one answer. There's other ones here that do matter, but that was the number one. And I wanted to call it out because I know a lot of companies, just standard practice, we don't do that. And it's hard to do that. I used to do it with our candidates, especially if we had spent several times, brought them for multiple interviews, and they came down to the final two. That second person, we owe them some sort of response about what happened. And I'd love for them next time around. They got down to the final two. I'd love for next time when I call them, them to take my call. If we don't tell them, then they're not going to answer the phone next time around. All right. One last thing here I want to share with you. So when we're talking with our research advisory board, I'll take you behind the scenes for 1 second. We talk to different HR leaders, talent acquisition leaders across the globe on a regular basis. And occasionally we ask them, hey, we've got some research coming up. What sort of things would you want to know? And someone brought it up this recent, a month or two ago, like, hey, we'd like to know about job hopping. We have these managers that think job hopping is this, but candidates may think it's that. And how do we prove, how do we know which group is which? And how do we get them on the same page? So we ask questions about job hopping and we cut that by age. And as you would imagine, there is definitely this split that starts to happen. So here's an example of that. When we look at every year changing jobs, you can comment right now if you want to. Is changing jobs every single year or on a, every year for a period of time, is that job hopping to you? Yes or no? Workers who are older than 54 years old, how it kind of broke out in the study, they are much more likely to say that than someone who's younger to say that is absolutely job hopping. Changing every year, well, that's ridiculous. Why would you do that? You're just a job hopper. But someone who's younger is much less likely to say that. And logically, there's actually a reason for that. When someone is younger in their career, they're more likely to be changing jobs more regularly. I know that I had, can't even keep track. I was working in a machine shop. I worked for a bank as a bank teller. I worked as an accounting assistant for an office assistant for a company here. Like all that within like a 2 or 3 year span because I was going through school. I needed something that worked with my schedule. And so like early career, you should expect some of that. And we heard from Sarah today in the conversation about hiring interns and looking at that. Like that's a unique sort of space. Don't assume that someone who's changing early in their career is a job hopper. If someone's, 20 years into their career and they've changed companies 4 times in the last year, you may have a problem, something to look at. There's a red flag there. But with hiring managers, more likely to be those with more seniority, more tenure, older in general, they're the ones who are making these decisions. And so it could be a little bit weird, sticky for the candidates, just something to keep in mind. And if you're educating on this, that's one thing I would encourage you to remind your managers where that is. It's fun. I don't have the chart in here because it's really busy, but by each age group, you can see them start to trend. Like, is this job hopping? Is this not? And it's trends all the way across. It's really, really interesting. Again, that final piece will be in the full report when we put that out so you can see that and learn more about it. Anything on the job hopping before we wrap up?
I want people to think and understand this because I used to be very critical of job hoppers on that aspect of it until you get to know the story. And I think that's part of the conversation that has to be had. Because if you get into a company that painted a picture of great culture and culture matters to you, as we've seen in the research, or flexibility matters, but when you get there, there's not really flexibility. And that was a key to you. Those things matters. And so I think when it comes to the job hoppers, having that relationship and trust in the process will help you have that openness to say, hey, this is why I was there. And a lot of times if you ask the right question, there's certain probing questions you can ask to get the candidate to feel comfortable with you, to share some of the information on, hey, I was here because of this. I was there. Reason why I only stayed 9 months is because, such and such. And so we'll see that, especially over the last 4 years, a lot of things have changed. There's been a lot of job hopping since 2020. And a lot of those reasons since the pandemic has to do with mental health, has to do with the well-being, has to do with the flexibility that they had. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're job hopping because of money or title. It's about the last 4 years. I've learned more about myself and what matters most to me. And if a company doesn't respect it or align with it, but they said they did, then I am going to move into a different career. So there's a balance there where you got to really know the person's heart. Because otherwise, if you look at me, I've been state hopping the last 6 years. It seems like every 2 years I'm going to Georgia or going to Tennessee, back to Indiana. And so I'm a state hopper. Why is that? Well, if you knew my heart, you knew my family and some of the circumstances there, then you'll understand that thing.
Yes.
And so asking the right questions with those job hoppers is a key.
Excellent. Wonderful. All right. So we're going to do some giveaways for all of you. I love the comments there. I love the thoughts there. And I had the same thought in my head a minute ago on the state hopping. By the way, I had that same thought. I didn't say it out loud, but you opened that door. So
it's kind of like shoe hopping. I hop a lot.
Did you show off your shoe, by the way?
Oh, we did show off.
Before we finish, George will show off his shoe before we finish up today, because I've never seen anything like it. I've never seen anything like it. So I'll just tell you that much really quickly. Okay, so we've been grabbing names throughout this. I mentioned earlier. So our good friend Trent Cotton, High Performance Recruiting. This is his book. So we're giving away copies of that. We're giving away some copies of my book, and you'd think I'd have a copy here to show you. Imagine a great looking copy of Talent Scarcity right here in my hands. Giving that away, and then we also did a giveaway on LinkedIn. People who were commenting, sharing, letting their friends know what they were going to hope to get from the session today. We got that winner as well. So let's go ahead and put those names up. So you can grab you a screenshot of this one. If your name is on this, just shoot a note to us. We'll get your stuff all wrapped up, packaged up, out the door probably. Actually, the Trent's books are on their way here right now. So they'll be here in the next few days. We'll get those packaged up and back out again. But all of you are winners that are listed here. So thank you for chiming in, for sharing, for being a part of this, for helping us to think more critically about this. There have been some good comments. I know George and I always love the comments, because we hear something in there, we see something in there that makes us think differently, that gives us a bigger perspective on things. All of you are making the profession better by being active in that. So thank you so much for being here, and congratulations to the winners for this. If you didn't win, don't you worry. HR Summer School is coming right up very soon. And actually, it's fun. HR Summer School happens in June. We'll be sending out a note about that when we send the credit information for this event. We'll send the note out and give you a one-click sign up for that. If you're registered for this event, it's one click, a sign up for summer school, 7.5 credits out of that event. It's a great format. But George actually got a chance to recently meet a young lady who we gave an award to at the event last year. We gave away an HR conference cruise, and I'm excited to announce we're giving away an HR conference cruise again this year, another registration of that. And so Misha got the chance. I saw Misha in the chat earlier. Misha got a chance to meet George on the cruise.
I got a chance to meet her. She's the queen.
Well, there you go. There you go. So they got the chance to connect there in person, which was such a joy. And so we'll be doing some great stuff at summer school. We hope all of you will join us for that. Just same kind of conversations we're having here. Really quickly, thank you to our supporters, Hi Bob, Filtered Indeed, for making today's event possible. We appreciate all of them for the good work that they're doing. All right, George, do you want to show the shoe off before we wrap this up today?
Yeah, this is the shoe.
I'll give you a big screen so you can.
No, this is not the. This is the bag that the shoe came in. So I actually wore these. Misha is the first one. She got to see these. I wore these for the first time on the HR cruise because I didn't have to step outside. So they've never been on actual ground.
Okay.
These shoes being relate to our very topic today. It's the recruiting, because sometimes what you see is not what you get, right? This looks like garbage to a lot of people, looks very ugly to a lot of people. But, you know, what's great about the shoe is that there's an L and an R inside, just in case you don't know which shoe it goes into. But these are some Nike Cactus. The cool thing about these shoes, Ben, is that they give you instructions on how to cut them. And there's different things that you're supposed to shave it down, but I'm not going to shave it. I like the wild look on these, but these are kind of unique shoes and shoes of the year. So, hey, listen, if somebody you're recruiting comes in that doesn't look like they fit your company, don't just throw them away. Ask questions.
There we go.
Get behind the craziness, and you'll see their heart behind that story. You like that?
I do love that tie-in. Very well done, George. Goodness, it's almost like you're a keynote speaker or something. Very well done. All right. I appreciate you for joining me, for spending some time with me, for coming down here in person. It's always great to see you. Yep. And I appreciate you for giving us some wisdom, some insights, and grateful for you. To everybody else out there, I hope you got some great ideas from today's session, some good thoughts, some good action steps, all of those kinds of things for this. And if nothing else, you got to see the most exciting pair of shoes you're going to see all week long. I guarantee it. Thank you all for joining us. Again, we'll be seeing everybody for summer school in June this year. Can't wait to see you there. We'll be sending out some details on that very shortly. We hope you got some good stuff, and thank you again.